All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's interview Kickstart session for the Headstart for 2026. Let me go ahead and share the slide deck real quick. Just a moment. All right. I hope that everybody can see my screen. Welcome again for Cracking Tech Interview Management session for 2026. Today we'll be focusing on engineering leadership positions, and by that I mean not just engineering managers across different levels, but also others such as product managers and TPMs specifically as well. And we'll focus on what are some of the things that folks that are planning to rotate into different companies in 2026? What are some of the things that folks can start doing right away? What are things to watch out for? What does the job landscape look like, and how to put yourself in a better position to prepare and so on. All right. This is a part of a two-day event organized by Interview Kickstart. Day one was yesterday, and day one focused more on the IC roles. So today is day two. This is session three, and I wanted to call out that right after this session, we have Ask Me Anything session, which is also scheduled for another hour and a half. So I believe everybody at this point has invite for those, and I highly recommend folks staying in for those. It's a great opportunity to ask any questions of myself or the rest of the panel members that will be attending as well. Those questions could be either related to the specific questions that you might have around your situation or general kind of questions. Anything is welcomed. Just to very briefly introduce myself, my name is Senad Cimic. Last 5 years or so, I've been coaching engineering management folks across all levels, line managers, managers, and so on, and some of the IC roles like TPMs, PMs, architects, principal engineers, and so on. Most of my career I spent at Amazon, where I spent a little bit over 12 and a half years. Second half of that, I managed global engineering orgs and EMs, senior EMs, and so on across US and India. Also served as a bar raiser. For those of you not familiar with the program, it's basically a program that I believe it initially started at Amazon, but later on was adopted by other companies as well, where for each external candidate, a bar raiser is assigned, and their function is to make sure that other interviewers know what they're doing, that they are qualified to interview specific candidates. And then most importantly, bar raisers, they drive hire or no hire decisions across candidates. So I did a little bit over 350 interviews there. In between my Amazon roles, I also worked at Snap or Snapshot, which is a social media company, as one of their engineering leaders for about a year. And I started my career a long time ago at a company called Thomson Reuters as a software engineer. So that's super brief about myself. Today we have a jam-packed session, a lot of interesting, cool topics. Before we get started, in terms of the free resources, I want to make sure that we don't forget this. So there will be a couple of categories of resources that will be shared after the class. So this includes the 2026 Tech Interview Playbook across the various roles, including sample interview questions and so on, and then also the 2026 Job Prep Toolkit. There'll be a lot of helpful details there. So look out for that notification after the class. For today's session, sort of the first hour and a half before we get into the Q&A session. So in the first half, we will be covering over what are the different career paths and role expectations across these three different roles. So engineering management, PMs, and TPMs. Through IK, there's different programs for all three, but today I'm covering all three of them, as there are some overlap, and a lot of times there are folks that are not necessarily clear on what are some of the cutover lines in terms of roles and responsibilities when comparing these three roles. We will also go over the interview approach and kind of what are some of the main competencies that are looked at in those interviews across all three domains, and how to prepare, what are some of the positives, what are some of the good examples, bad examples, and so on. We'll go over the market readiness and what does the job landscape look like in IT in the US specifically. We'll also briefly go over some of the AI expectations per role and what are some of those things that could help you help separate you from the other roles, sorry, from the other candidates, and then briefly touch up on the H-1B topic, as that's one of the common topics as well. All right, this is the more specific view of the agenda. So we'll start with a market reality and then go over the others. One thing specifically I like to call out is number 5 is going to be very interesting, where we're going to go over the live speed mocks and where we will, I will go ahead and share the live feedback as well. So super excited about that, but the other ones are also super important as well. So let's quickly go over those various topics, starting with market reality. So first off, to start, all 3 roles that we're focusing on today, product managers, TPMs, EMs, they sit in this intersection of the product engineering, business, and customers and so on, right? And collectively, they drive what to build, how to build it, how to deliver it, who builds it, and so on, right? There's some overlap there between the roles. So these roles are essential across any kind of company, not necessarily just tech-first companies or Tier-1 companies, but also across Fortune 500, any kind of company that has significant development department. These roles are going to be critical, and especially at this time and age, there are a lot of what would be typically considered non-tech companies. They are going digital, right? So with all that, there is significant effort and investment needed into the tech. Even after some of the correction after the COVID in terms of the job landscape, there's still significant demand for these roles. Now, it's a different question and different topic on how to secure these roles and what are things that you need to have to land, where it's a PM, TPM, and EM jobs. Those are things that did change slightly, and we'll cover those in later slides. Very quickly, here's what demands look like, and these are projected demands based on some of the external data across PMs, TPMs, and then EMs as well. So there will be increased demand in the foreseeable future. There's some interesting data points here around the openings per year. I believe this is for the current year, but then the percentage projections are for the upcoming years as well. So at least that part is encouraging. However, like I mentioned earlier, is even though there might be jobs increasing in a certain concentration across these roles, there are the criteria slightly changed, and what separates good versus great candidates for these roles did slightly change as well. One of the things that everybody noticed, obviously, is there were a lot of layoffs throughout not just this year, previous year as well, which means there's a big influx of the candidates on the market and so on. But one of the things that has been observed is that even though there might be, generally speaking, more candidates on the market, there is a lack of candidates that have specific skills, whether it's AI or skills in a specific domains, like whether it's fintech, e-commerce, and whatnot, right? And the average time to fill some of those, even though there's companies are processing a lot of candidates and so on, the average time to fill it didn't necessarily shrink to a relative minimum, but companies are still taking time and making sure that they're finding the right perfect candidates. One of the things to note is this last comment on the slide, and by the way, this was philosophy across a lot of Tier-1 companies for a very long time now, that the philosophy is companies would rather wait to find a great candidate versus a mediocre one. Now that philosophy is more widespread across the board, and in addition to that, companies have luxury to not only wait for a perfect candidate that's solid across technical, behavioral, and so on, but also candidates that have specific experience they're looking for, whether it's industry-specific experience, domain-specific experience, and so on. This slide captures on a high level compensation bands on the top of the market. So these are the Tier-1 and some of the top startups, and the data is based on the levels FYI. So There is obviously the difference is significant. That this slide doesn't capture low and mid range for these roles, but assuming folks might be aware of those, so you'll notice that differences it can be significant here. One clarification here, as folks might not be familiar, the total compensation, especially for tier ones and startups, it's usually a mix of base salary, bonus, which is typically in cash, but then also equity. So for a lot of tier ones, a lot of public companies, this is going to be in form of RSUs, or basically stocks that vest over a period of time. All right, moving to the next slide. Here are some of the realities based on 2025. So, like I mentioned earlier, even though demand might be up for specific roles in specific geographic areas, the hiring is very selective, and if you're coming from the candidate side, if you're looking for a job, slower, right? Because there is higher focus in some of the specialized areas where it's AI integration, cybersecurity, cloud infra expertise, and so on. So. Even though jobs are there, the time to hire is still relatively long. AI is a hiring accelerant. And there's a large, and I think in one of the future slides we have the actual numbers of the incremental number of basically how AI-related jobs are increasing or openings are increasing. And this is combination of roles that where EMs, TPMs, and PMs that will be leading and building AI-specific products, or roles that even though you might not be working on AI specifically, AI is strongly preferred, and in the job descriptions and so on, it is listed as one of the either nice to haves or one of the prerequisites as well. The last thing here is the landscape in terms of tech jobs. If you go back, say 6-7 years ago, when it came to most attractive companies in terms of compensation and type of work and so on, typically those were FAANG-like companies, right? So or potential some other tier one companies, but the pool was much smaller. Today, that pool is bigger in terms of the tier one companies, or kind of what's considered tier one in terms of the tech. That number in US probably around 50-ish or so. But in addition to that, there is a number of startups, attractive startups with a high potential that are also competitive when it comes to compensation and so on, right? So that's what contributes to the overall demand. All right, now we're gonna move to the role clarity across these three different roles, and we'll start with engineering managers. So engineering managers, they own teams, people, as part of that, building the team, coaching, career development, and the engineering execution for one or more teams. If you're a line manager, probably going to be managing one team. If you're manager or managers, directly and indirectly, you're going to be managing more teams. One caveat that I would like to mention here is when it comes to engineering execution, it's not just execution, but it's also your involvement in strategic planning as well. So that's the reason I want to call out that's one of the main differences I notice when candidates are coming, especially if you're coming from consulting or vendor background, or some tier 2, tier 3 companies where there is a clearer line between here's a product, they build a roadmap, and then you execute it. A lot of tier 1 companies, well, pretty much most of tier 1 companies and a lot of startups, that line is very blurry, very blurrier, and you are expected to contribute to the strategy, develop business acumen. Even though there would be product managers that are directly responsible for that, still you're expected to influence it and so on, right? So that's one thing I want to mention in addition to some of these core ownership areas. I went over about the first box there, hiring, coaching, performance management, team culture. So you're on the hook for all of that. Delivery, obviously, so not just the developing a roadmap, planning, and working with stakeholders to come up with a roadmap, synchronizing across dependencies, stakeholders, and so on, but delivering with high quality, reliability, and as part of that, along the way, enforcing best practices and so on. As an EM, depending on on which level you are, you will be at some point responsible for providing technical direction. So even though you're not going to be designing systems yourself and you're not going to be You're not going to be implementing things. You are responsible for making sure, basically for everything, all the technical deliverables that your teams deliver, right? So you need to make sure that you have a strong team and that you can mentor folks within your team when it comes to making right system design trade-offs, right decisions on the technology, what kind of technology to use, best engineering practices, best operational practices, how you keep the quality high, overall health of your systems, and so on, right? So for that reason, this is commonly probed in the interviews as well. In one of the later slides, I'll go into what are some of the more on more granular level, how what specific tech competencies are covered and so on, right? But that is one of the expectations. The higher level you go, so senior manager or manager of managers or a director, the higher you go, less you're going to be involved in technical direction. However, still there will be some involvement. So even on a technical or in some case, even on the VP level, you will be needed to provide inputs and some high level guidance, at least on a technical technical direction across your organization. And then engineering health. I briefly touched upon that in terms of the engineering and operational health, but all the basic stuff, velocity, code quality, on-call, and what does operational health look like, tech debt, testing, deployment practices, CI/CD, all that good stuff, right? One of the other differences between Tier 3, Tier 2 companies and some of the top tier ones is in top tiers, EMs tend to own everything, right? So you're responsible for everything. From testing, from deployment, not necessarily customer support, but operations and so on, right? Now, there might be some centralized teams that might be able to help you here and there, but generally speaking, you still need to understand what are the best practices, how to drive it in the absence of help from other teams. All right, now we're gonna moving to the next slide that provides kind of percentage or the responsibility coverage for EMs. One of the things that you'll notice on this slide is, okay, EMs, they wear a lot of different hats and basically they're responsible for everything. So that's out of the three roles, I would say, yes, EMs typically tend to wear the most hats and are either directly or indirectly responsible for most in terms of the coverage. So even some of the bottom ones, product strategy, like I mentioned, even though that might not be your main responsibility, and even though there might be a product team that is responsible for product strategy and product roadmap, still you need to be able to not just understand it and convert it into a deliverable plan and deliver against it, but also you need to be able to influence it, negotiate it, use your business judgment, your business acumen that you've developed over time, and so on. Same thing for analytics as well. Even though there might be a data science team or team of BIEs that help slice and dice data, you should still be able to understand some of it and be able to ask the right questions around the metrics and so on. All right, now we're going to move to TPMs or tech program managers. So as a TPM, you own program execution, delivery of a complex cross-team initiatives. One thing I like to point out here, it's not necessarily just programs, but projects as well. The reason why I mentioned that is definition of TPMs might vary across companies. And even in some cases, within the same company, the expectations might be different. When I mention what I mean by program versus project is, as a program manager or TPM whose focus is on a program manager, you're gonna be focused on a program that has a lot of different inputs. There might be a number of different tech projects contributing to it. There might be non-technical projects as well. So you have a relatively wide audience that need to manage a lot of moving pieces and so on. On the other side, you could be assigned to drive a execution of a specific project, say extra large project that's maybe multi-year. Maybe it includes or requires collaboration across 50 different teams. So a lot of different data points, a lot of different stakeholders there they need to manage in the context of a single project, right? And then at the same time, it might be a mix of both. So for instance, at Amazon, over my experience, past experience at Amazon, I manage a number of different TPMs as well. And expectations of when I would need the TPMs to manage program aspects of things versus leading projects, it varied, right? It varied based on organizational needs. So there needs to be some of the flexibility. Anyhow, here are some of the core ownership areas listed. So obviously, program planning and similarly for project as well, defining milestones, dependencies, risk management, proactively identifying potential bottlenecks, addressing them, and so on. Cross-team dependency management and cross functional stakeholder management is critical. So you'll be communicating with not just engineering teams, but non-technical teams as well, including product, legal, customer representation, other engineering teams like science, testing, data engineering, depending on what the organizational model looks like. Status reporting communication across all levels is super important. So you're gonna need to be able to communicate with the junior engineers all the way up to VPs, and be able to modify your communication based on who the audience is, right? So what kind of how you communicate status reports obviously is going to be different based on do you talk to a line manager versus a VP of organization or a CTO, right? So that distinguishment is important. And then obviously ensuring successful delivery in time with the right quality and so on. One thing that not mentioned here, but I do want to call it out is as a TPM, you have a lot of responsibility, but no authority, right? So typically as a TPM, you don't have individuals that are directly reporting to you. However, you are on the hook. So if you are leading a project, if you're a TPM for a project, and there are some issues, you're the first person I'm gonna go to. You're responsible for it, even though you might not have authority, right? So that's one important thing to understand, and could be frustrating, but also it could be opportunity as well. And for that reason, it's important to have a good cross collaboration, collaborative skills, be able to build relationships across various stakeholders, across levels, effective communication, and so on. There are one final comment on this one. There are rarely there are TPM roles. This is more of a principal and above TPMs that do manage other TPMs. So it is possible that there could be roles out there, a TPM manager, where you'll be managing other TPMs. And that's one of the natural growth paths for TPMs. A lot of times, as folks grow to manager of other TPMs, the other natural step is becoming a senior engineering manager. Here is the map of competencies. As expected, the product strategy is the one of those buckets where you don't, as a TPM, you don't necessarily need to worry a whole lot about. So product managers are on the hook for that. EMs also partially as well. When it comes to TPMs, typically you're not responsible for that. You worry more about what to deliver, how to deliver it, what are the best practices, so not necessarily what. However, there are, especially this varies across companies and depending on what kind of product you will be managing or program you will be managing. But in some cases, there could be expectations that you do work directly with product on nuances of the product roadmap and so on. Everything else is typically covered, which is reflected in the interviews as well. So execution, technical depth. This is important, by the way, and this is one of the areas where TPM candidates commonly fail. Things like system design interviews, right? So even though as a TPM, you're not going to be designing systems, you're not going to be necessarily designing systems yourself. However, you will be involved in system design discussions, and you will be expected to ask the right questions around technological choices. Also asking questions about feasibility of taking some shortcuts and so on, right? And for that, you do need to have some technical depth, and that's the reason why those are covered in the interviews. Coding is not covered typically in the TPM interviews. Communication, leadership, and people, or leadership and relationship building, influencing without authority, and all that. That's also heavily emphasized. All right, now we're moving to the third one, product managers. So as product manager, you own the product strategy and the roadmap, right? So you own the product strategy, and by that I mean typically a long-term vision for the product, not just for, hey, what are we doing for 2026, but what is next 2-3 years, what are some of those big investments? Not necessarily going into details for the whole 3 years, but at least having some sort of vision, right? And then as part of that, converting that vision into incremental roadmap. So you have a, say, 3-year product vision. Okay, what have you done this year? What are you doing in 2026? Potentially 2027, but I mean, in terms of granular planning, the focus will be 2026 and so on. And then as part of that, you would be also working closely with other stakeholders, including customers, understanding the market, understanding the opportunities, quantifying those opportunities. You will be also aligning with leadership and making sure that your vision is aligned with overall company's vision or organizational vision in terms of the product. You'll be also working closely with engineering teams, so converting the product ideas and the product definition into requirements. So working closely with engineering teams to make sure that you're effectively communicating those requirements, aligning with engineering and other technical teams on the milestones and sequentially how things are going to be delivered, how they're going to be evaluated. For instance, is it A/B tests, and what if so? What do designs of those experiments look like, and so on. And then you are on the hook for business outcomes, right? For everything that you do on as a product manager, there will be some sort of outcome metric, right? Revenue or some sort of dollar amount is obvious one, but there could be a bunch of others as well. Customer satisfaction, or how many active users and so on, right? So you need to be able to come up with a roadmap and a vision that is positively impacting some of those KPIs from the product side. Similar comment as for TPMs, meaning you as a product manager typically will not have folks reporting to you. However, there are instances across some companies where you might have folks reporting to you, especially if you are, let's say, relatively high proven and seasoned product manager. So say you might be principal product manager, and your next growth path would be starting to manage other product managers. And then beyond that would be becoming a single-threaded leader, or basically somebody that manages not just product, but engineering as well. So generally speaking, across Tier-1 companies, that unification of, when it comes to, from the leadership perspective, product versus engineering happens at a director level. So that's a typical natural growth path for product managers. But I would highlight that this is very rare. Most of the folks don't get to that level. Here are the competencies and the sort of the heat map of where the emphasis is for product managers. So as expected, product strategy vision, it's high there. Analytics metrics, so in terms of evaluating the opportunities, quantifying opportunities, and evaluating how the business is moving, at least for your part of the world, super important. Communication, storytelling, influencing, and conflict resolution, very important as well. Note that technical depth is not as important because between engineering teams or EMs and TPMs, they own how and the actual execution, implementation, and so on. However, one caveat there is if you are product manager for a highly technical product, like let's say you are product manager at AWS or at certain Oracle teams, for example, or something like that, right? There will be, in that case, there could be higher expectation in terms of technical depth and making sure that you do understand system design, for instance, at least on a high level, and that you're able to ask the right questions and so on. Similarly for execution, even though engineering teams will be owning the execution, you would need to be involved here and there, at least to make sure that you're providing your point of view on identifying and resolving bottlenecks. And then especially when it comes to non-technical execution. So sometimes to execute a project, not everything is about engineering effort. Sometimes it includes collaboration and figuring out things with legal, for instance, or with some of the other teams. And those typically fall on between PMs and TPMs, depending on the landscape. And then similarly for people leadership, even though you're not going to be managing people, you are expected to influence and just like as a TPM, influence without authority and so on. All right, here's another view on PM versus TPM versus EM comparison there. So just to very briefly go over that, product manager versus EM. So product manager is product success first and strategy. EM is more about the building a team that is set for success and be able to deliver what product defines, the execution for it, and so on. Even though, like I mentioned earlier, the line is not strict, there is, in some cases, product managers are expected to be a little bit more involved in some technical decisions and vice versa. Engineer managers, in some cases, are more expected to influence the product roadmap. TPMs versus EMs. TPMs focus more on the process management and execution of the project deliverables versus EMs more on the team management and people. And then the last one, product manager versus TPM. So again, product is more focused on what and the idea and what is the outcome, what are the business metrics that will be moved, where the needle will be moved, and so on. Versus TPM is more focused on making it happen. So execution, working with whatever stakeholders need to be involved, identifying them, looking around the corner to make sure that potential bottlenecks are proactively identified and addressed. And so on. All right. Let's move on. Gonna move on to interviews and evaluation for these roles. Starting with engineer managers. So here's the typical structure of a EM loop. And this is, by the way, same whether you're a line manager or manager of managers. If you get a little bit higher to, say, director level, there will be some changes there. But typically, it's people management and leadership. So as part of people management, it's how you build and set your team for success. Performance management, meaning poor performers, top performers, promotions, and so on. There is technical aspect of it, system design and technical judgment. System design, self-explanatory. Technical judgment, it could be around engineering excellence or operational excellence in some of those. Execution and delivery, so how you execute the roadmap and projects, and what kind of processes and mechanisms you apply along the way. That's very relevant. Like I mentioned in one of the previous slides, you might be expected to also contribute to the product roadmap as well. So as part of that, the actual roadmap and strategic thinking is important. Behavioral and leadership principles and overall cultural fit is also important. And then the last one, which is optional depending on the type of company and the role you're interviewing for, is there might be some coding data points collected. Not all companies collect data points for EMs. Actually, most of them do not, but there are some, like Meta, for instance, that do collect coding data points and have coding rounds for engineering managers. And this might be in a format of either coding, standard coding type of questions like lead code format. You ask a question, you go through requirements, edge cases, and so on, and you implement it, right? But then it could be also in the format of the code reviews. So you are presented a couple of different samples of code. You go through it, identify what are things that you would improve, what are potential concerns, and so on, right? So this is, again, a minority of companies do that, but in case they do it, it is important to brush up on those things as well. Okay. Here's the evaluation focus for EMs, another cut of it or another view. So people management, I briefly talked about some of those details, along with common rejection and reasons, right? So for each of these, here is listed some of the common rejection reasons based on the external data. So for instance, when it comes to people management, one of the common one is not having enough people management experience. So for instance, a lot of times we get candidates that want to transition externally into EM role, but they're coming from IC background. So most of the Tier-1 companies, they do expect you to have some level of industry experience in the role that you're entering for. So if you're entering for EM, ideally you would have at least 2 to 3 years of formal EM experience, right? But not all the candidates have. It is typically a concern. However, there are some potential workarounds in how to mitigate some of those things. Another common one is not having a good data points around poor performers. Managing poor performers. A lot of companies, especially Tier 2 companies, performance expectations in terms of how to handle poor performers is a little bit more relaxed and so on. So, for instance, you might have a poor performer on your team sitting for more than a year, for instance, versus at a lot of tier 1 companies, it is expected as part of the culture and overall the HR guideline that identify and address those individuals much faster. So basically taking much quicker action, whether it is managing them up, meaning their performance improved, or managing them out. The other one is technical leadership. I briefly in the previous slide talked about that, but anyhow, one of the common rejections there is lack of technical depth. A lot of EM candidates, especially the more senior you go and the longer you've been in EM role, naturally, the more rusty you get when it comes to the system design, coding, in case in case companies are asking for coding and so on, right? So that's one of the things that I would suggest that folks start brushing up, not waiting till the last moment, but come up with some sort of plan and periodically start getting familiarized with some of the main system design concepts, for instance, how to approach system design interviews and so on. Execution is super important and judgment and culture fit overall in terms of corresponding common rejections. Poor communication or extreme styles, that's one of the common ones. When I say extreme styles of management, meaning if you kind of think about it on a spectrum, micromanaging versus being very high level and basically delegating everything, right? Typically, companies are looking for a fine balance. And now what that balance is, it depends on a company. So for instance, what that balance is for Meta, for EMs, is different than what is at Amazon for EMs, right? So knowing company culture and expectations for the role is super important, and making sure that you are, in your answers, you are elaborating on the balance and to make sure that those things are not coming up as a red flag. Lack of ownership, blaming others for failures, that's self-explanatory. So we can go ahead to the next one. Here are some of the examples of green flags. And now this list is actually much more detailed. These are just some of the top ones. So having good stories around and examples around developing talent and building a healthy culture. One of the examples, for instance, if I ask you a question around, to give me an example where you had to manage a poor performer. Most of the EMs manage the poor performers that are in junior roles, like let's say junior engineers. So coming up with that example is good, but typically not bar raising. What would be better is, say, if you have an example of a senior engineer or staff engineer that was poor performer they need to manage, right? Because that takes more judgment, more integrity, has a wider blast radius that you need to mitigate potentially, and so on. Next one is clear articulation of tough decisions and rationale. That one is super important. In addition to the next one, the ability to zoom in and out and provide details when needed. The reason why I highlighting these two specifically is a lot of times when EM candidates fail behavioral interviews, it's not that they don't have a rich portfolio where they did impactful and cool and impressive things, right? But it's because they, even though they might be picking the right example to talk about, they don't necessarily in their story articulate well enough what were the impressive data points around the impact, around the complexity of it, around the impressive things when it comes to actions that it took around problem solving, influencing, and so on, right? So it's very important to practice that articulation and stories when it comes to answering behavioral questions. And then humility and self-reflection. So be honest that we all make mistakes. What's more important is how you react or how you address those mistakes, how you learn from it, not just yourself, but how you enable learning across the wider organization. So for instance, having a data points where you drive postmortems, where you are self-critical of yourself and a team, but you drive postmortems that have a much wider impact through, for instance, defining action items or process improvements that benefit the whole company or organization and so on. Here's a typical TPM loop, what it looks like. So on a high level program and project management cases, System design, like I mentioned, is important one. So system design is one of the common technical data points that is typically collected. Behavior and leadership, especially when it comes to ability to influence without authority, and conflict resolution, right? So there's along the way, you're gonna have conflicts across pretty much all the stakeholders. Your ability to negotiate with them, influence them, and do all that in relatively quick time is critical. And then stakeholder management as well, and communicating across levels and roles. Here are some of the what the focus is when it comes to evaluation. Here, these are some of the top ones. The list is a bit more detailed. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to cover all of those. So just on a high level, execution organization, it is super important. So it's you need to be able to organize the teams around the program and projects and so on. You need to be able to technically influence folks when needed and understand what are the system level deficiencies and why things are prioritized the way they are. What are the opportunities to potentially cut corners, or even in some cases potentially increase tech debt in order to deliver faster, but with a plan on addressing it later on. And communication is very critical, right, across both technical and non-technical stakeholders. Some of the common rejection patterns are vague answers. I think that one's kind of general, applies to EMs, PMs as well. The other one is ability to take a step back and think about it strategically. A lot of, even though strategy is not necessarily expected for TPMs, you are, especially if you are managing a program, you need to be able to demonstrate how you came up with a high-level plan for a program, right? Where you're not just tactically managing project by project, for example, but that you have some sort of plan and you are able to operate both at the low level and the high level as well. Conflict resolution, or lack of examples of conflict resolution situations, is one of the common things. So, for instance, if I ask you to tell me about a time where you need to resolve conflict with somebody in an interview, don't pick an example where you had a conflict with an engineer, with a junior engineer, because typically to resolve those kind of conflicts is much more simpler, and I would expect most TPMs to be able to do, versus, say, solving a conflict with a couple different engineering directors, right? So it matters who the conflict is, what is the nature and the complexity of the conflict, and so on. So think about those things as you're prepping up your stories and examples for these kind of questions. And then the last one is failure to identify root cause and or improving the process. This is the reason I mentioned this is a lot of TPMs will focus on how to move the project across the line, and which is the core expectation, right? However, when the bottlenecks are hit, it's also important to think about what are some of the mechanisms that can be introduced or processes that can benefit future projects or programs that you might manage, and not necessarily you, but other teams as well, right? So think about that wider impact there. Here are some of the green flags for TPMs. So moving quickly and being able to make impact in messy scenarios, proactive risk identification mitigation plans, using appropriate technical vocabulary, and here I'm specifically referring to the demonstrating good technical judgment, whether it's in the system design focused interview, or it could be also through some of the behavioral questions as well. It is important that you demonstrate that you are not just focused on the execution part, but when needed, you are able to get involved in some of the technical judgment and technical decisions, and have stories around that. Collaborative tone is important, and as part of that, making sure that interviewer does have a good feeling about your skills when it comes to building relationships, influencing without authority, and so on. Right. Here we are going through the same coverage for product managers. So typical product manager interviews are product sense or design, and now this could come in a different format. It could either be hypothetical, or it could be probing and asking you about your experience when you design a product, and how did you go about it? What are the what are things you need to consider, the data points, and so on. Strategy and metrics. So again, product strategy is super important, and metrics. So what are some of the KPIs they typically consider, how you work with customers and so on to identify them. Execution part of it on the product side, not necessarily the implementation and so on, but on the product side, how you approach execution, how you make sure that engineering team is set up for success when it comes to execution, at least from your side in terms of requirements, in terms of the milestones, P0s versus P1s, and so on. Ownership and conflict resolution is also important, just as in TPMs. Typically, you as a product manager, you gotta need to be able to influence without authority. So you need to be able to demonstrate great communication skills, influencing, negotiating, and so on. And then in some cases, technical fluency, especially if you'll be interviewing for a type of PM role where you will be owning a product strategy for highly technical product, whether it's AWS, Azure, for example. Those are just some of the examples. Here's evaluation focus for PMs. So matching what we previously talked about, product sense and vision, structured thinking, communication, and business and metric orientation, and making sure that whatever you do is moving the right needle or is impacting the right product KPIs in the end, and so on. Some of the common rejection reasons are weak product sense or strategy. For instance, a lot of from personal experience, anecdotally, a lot of product managers I interviewed that are coming from say either startups or a tier 2, tier 3 companies. They in some cases they don't unfortunately have the ownership of the whole product strategy, but instead they own product on a feature by feature level, right? So it is important to have that wider sense, the strategy, being able to talk about the stories or how you would approach building the strategy for the whole product, as part of that demonstrating user empathy, working with the customers, users, and so on. Unstructured and rambling answers, I think that one is general across across all three roles, PMs, TPMs, and EMs. No evidence of ownership or measurable outcomes. That one is kind of tied to my first comment. So if you come with from a environment or a background where you didn't own the full product vision or strategy, well, then this will be one of the concerns. And then insufficient technical fluency, it could be a concern if you are interviewing to be leading a highly technical product. Yeah. And here are some of the green flags, just on a very high level. So starting with users, working backwards from a customer, clear structural breakdown of problems, and so on. Quick time check. I think we're a little bit behind time, so I will go ahead and accelerate a bit so we get enough time for a live speed mock. We're moving
No,
now.
it's okay. So this is on the side. It's okay. You can carry it in your pace. You don't need to rush. It's fine.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Moving on to the next topic, which is how AI is changing expectations for some of these roles. Like I mentioned previously, even though the total number of roles might be expanding, it's hard to land some of them, and AI has a part there. As some of you might have noticed across news updates, media, and so on, there's a lot of big tech companies and other companies that announced big investments in the AI, and this slide kind of captures that investments not just in 2025, but significant investments through 2026, and that will directly translate into the roles that are being hired and so on. So on the AI part, for AI specific roles, it is very encouraging. And I would add not just AI specific roles, but also other EM, PM, and TPM roles that do have some expectations in terms of utilizing AI. Based on the LinkedIn research, roles that require 2 or more AI skills have advantage in terms of the higher salaries and landing rates in terms of getting jobs. So that's encouraging if you are in the AI field or if you're planning to learn and get more experience in the AI One thing to add there is it needs to, as part of that, and we'll get in later slides as well, it's important to identify properly when using AI adds genuine value, when it is appropriate versus over-engineering, right? And as part of that, understand the risks, the costs, the latency, and so on. All right. Here's what, on a very high level, what AI ready looks like across these three roles. For AI ready PMs, you need to be able to, working backwards from customers and identifying product strategy, product roadmap, you need to be able to identify where potential AI opportunities are for solving specific user problems, business impact, and so on. Another one that I would like to add here is not just necessarily for PMs, but this would be also for EMs and TPMs, is how AI can help accelerate things, especially when it comes to experimentation and validating some of the product decisions. Is it certain features, are they good or bad when it comes to overall impact, right? So it is expected in AI world that a lot of this experimentation moves much faster overall. In terms of TPM roles, it is important to understand not just ML, but AI lifecycle as well. And when it comes to managing such projects, understand overall importance in integration across different phases, data, including data quality and so on, training, deployment, monitoring, and so on. For EMs, given that EMs wear a lot of different hats, you are expected to, at least on a high level, super high level, understand what I mentioned previously for PMs, TPMs. But in addition to that, understand how AI enables your team to move faster, not just in a context of experiments and so on, but day to day as well, right? So when it comes to best practices in terms of using AI assistants for producing code, for instance, or for some of the day-to-day activities and so on, right? As well as mentioned here, applying and shipping AI features safely and reliably. Here's an interesting survey of PMs in terms of the spread of AI at work. So there's, as mentioned here, there's heavy use of AI in different phases. Similarly applies to TPMs and EMs, especially for day-to-day activities. So I mean, there's some very tactical day-to-day things where it's document generation or analysis, risk analysis, but also things like roadmap management, potentially generating things like Gantt charts when it comes to project execution, and so on. Some of the potential product manager interviews when it comes to AI, here are a couple of common examples. Note that these could also be asked in the EM and TPM interviews, especially if you're interviewing for AI heavy role, right? So for instance, how would you integrate generative AI into a specific product for, that you'll be managing in the role that you're interviewing for? So those are some of the interesting things and type of questions to think about. How would you answer them? What are things that you will consider, and make sure that you have deep enough understanding about the basic AI concepts that you're talking about and limitations and so on. Similarly, here are some of the potential TPM questions and EM questions as well. So on the TPM side, it's going to be more around the execution across various phases. As part of that, you might need to work with different teams to make it happen. Balancing the innovation versus the actual delivery versus the privacy, security, quality, and so on. So a lot of that applies just as it would in a lot of other non-AI driven projects as well. For EMs, a lot of things that I mentioned apply as well, because as EM, you have a wider area of responsibility. But in addition to that, there could be questions around AI best practices and how do you use those to accelerate and increase the performance bar for your teams. So how do you use that to keep your engineers accountable to deliver faster, for instance, and so on. And how are you building a team and make sure that your team has know-how when it comes to dealing with AI technology. This slide focuses on future-proofing skills in the AI world. some of the things that are valuable even more are emotional intelligence and leadership. So AI doesn't replace that. That is still very much needed. Being able to think strategically and coming up with a valid set of problems to solve, and creativity around how to solving them, and what are the things to focus on and so on, right? So those are the things that AI typically doesn't address. AI helps you accelerate uh, how to drive the implementation and some of those things, right? But that creative thinking is still needed. You need to be able to have good understanding when it comes to data literacy, experimentation, what are some of the best practices, and so on. Not just in this domain, but generally as well. So even though AI might be doing certain things on you, or you might delegate certain things to AI, you still need to be able to demonstrate good fundamentals on double checking AI's work and making sure it still makes sense, right? Versus just using AI blindly and moving on quickly to something else. Adaptability and continuous learning is a must, not just in the context of AI, which is a fast-moving domain, but generally speaking, I mean, all of us have been in the IT industry for a while. This has been a trend throughout, but now with AI, it's even more important. And then ethical and critical thinking is something that's getting significantly more important, especially when it comes to AI. Given the power of AI and where it could be used, it is important. And in some cases, there could be interview questions around that. All right, now let's move to the exciting part, which is around live speed mock interviews. This is something that through IK programs, it's done in the workshop sessions, for instance, or mock interviews and so on. Here we're gonna do a slightly more lightweight version of it, and as part of that, I think we have about 3 to 4 questions that we will cover, and for each question, we're gonna go over what is the question on a high level. I'll understand what it is, some of the expectations. And then I'll go ahead and ask for any volunteers. And then if you do consider volunteering, please raise your hand. At that point, a person will be randomly selected. So for each question, we're gonna target 1 volunteer. You're gonna get a few minutes to answer the question, and then after that, I'll share the feedback, and then we'll also go over some of what are the do's and don'ts for each of the questions. The questions that have been selected are not specific to the role. So meaning that whether you are PM, EM, or a TPM, feel free to volunteer to answer any of these questions. And we'll start with the first one. I think all of them are actually scenario-based questions. So the first one is, the scenario is a senior stakeholder demands a must-ship feature in 4 weeks. Your team estimated a significantly longer time, 10 weeks, to deliver it safely. The stakeholder is pushing for you just to make it happen and so on. And the question is, how would you push back and align on a realistic plan without damaging trust with the stakeholder? So there's a number of different competencies that are tested here. One is around the planning, having a backbone and pushing back when needed, influencing, especially influencing without authority, because assumption here is it could be somebody more senior than you. Your negotiating skills and how are you gonna negotiate and present your recommendation, evaluating trade-offs, executive level communication and decision framing as well. And then also stakeholder management as well, in case you are making changes and you are making a roadmap or investment changes that are impacting something else. It's important to communicate those effectively across the board as well. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. This is, even though this is scenario-based question, you can answer, there's 2 ways you can answer it. You can answer it in general terms, like, okay, in general, this is how I would approach it, and then make sure that you are demonstrating breadth of the different things that you would do and so on. Because in this particular scenario, there's a lot of different options, right? You could potentially descope the project, you could shuffle resources around or negotiate loaners, resources or engineers from other teams. You could negotiate pushing back the timeline. You could negotiate deprioritizing something else in order to to make room for this particular project, which is kind of aligned to reshuffling resources that I mentioned previously. So there's a lot of different options, right? And it's important to cover your experience and knowledge of what those different options you'll go through and so on. The other way to answer it is you could pick an example from your past where you needed to do something very similar. So that's fine as well. But one thing I would like to mention here is if you are picking an example, then make sure that that example demonstrates breadth as well, right? So it does cover a lot of these different things, right, that are expected to be included in the answer. And this guidelines and comments from my side applies to the other ones that I will be covering. So that way I will not be repeating the same thing in the interest of time. All right. Now it looks like we have we have a couple hands raised. Let's see. I believe Pooja, at least on my side, it's showing Pooja as a first in the queue. So I will Pooja, I will allow you to unmute yourself and feel free to come on mic and start your answer whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I was in a situation, I'm working in a telco company, and we were supposed to onboard ChatGPT reporting. My team ingests data from various domains in the telco company and transform it into data analytics and AI/ML use cases. So we were supposed to onboard ChatGPT, enterprise ChatGPT usage by all the employees. And we were given 4 weeks time frame to do this, and this involved uh, end-to-end ingestion, and as well as resulting into the views which can be used directly by the downstream. So I worked with the engineers and figured out with the resource who are working, and there were multiple two groups, and they had conflicting priorities, and that's how the features we estimated that the work back schedule, it will take at least 10 weeks. And so there was a deadlock here. So from my experience, I know that 20% of the items bring 80% of the impact and ROI. And either we have to negotiate on the timeline. That was like, no, you have to deliver in 4 weeks only. So now resources, even if I get resources from outside, that's not going to help me because they don't know this is our data ingestion team. So only thing which was like quality we can't do. So that's basically I have to trade off and negotiate with these two engineering managers, with my development engineer, data engineer. So we negotiated and what MVP we will provide them. And the end result was that in 4 weeks, we were able to provide and satisfy two top features from Enterprise ChatGPT and three features from the AI Hub team. So both of them together as a MVP. And then we promised them that in the next 4 weeks window, we will deliver the rest of all the items. And that was a completely trade-off and negotiated. And in the end result, at least we have a dashboard in Power BI, which was running up and showing how employees are using ChatGPT, who are the top performers. Definitely, we don't had must. We definitely we included must have, and of course some nice to have features are not included in this. But MVP was delivered, and we got extra time by this, and we were able to prove ourselves as success instead of, and it was win-win for everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pooja. All right, I captured some notes just very quickly. I liked that it was the answer was easy to understand. You properly used the SAR format. It was easy for me to pick up I think the main data points you were trying to communicate. I also like how you mentioned how you successfully applied your experience in terms of ROI and making sound decisions there, trade-off decisions. Great that you were able to meet the 4 week timeline, and also like the fact that you identified or renegotiated MVP, and then the others, and that the others were accomplished as a fast follow. Some of the improvement opportunities, potential improvement opportunities are. Well, first of all, what is your role? Were you a TPM, or are you planning to interview for a TPM role or a EM?
TPM.
TPM. Okay, great. Thanks. One of the improvement of potential improvement opportunities is to provide a little bit more details on how you negotiated, right? So you mentioned we a lot, including we negotiated and so on, right? Well, given that in situations like this, that negotiation part is very critical, add a little bit more details on why this kind of negotiation was complex and challenging, and how did you navigate it to the point that I wouldn't expect most of other good TPMs to do, right? So this includes, for instance, when it comes to this negotiation, did you partner with some folks to do the data analysis and collect some sort of data that would back up your recommendation? Did you write a proposal that very clearly captures your recommendation compared to other options, and what are some of the trade-offs? How did you iteratively review your proposal with other stakeholders? The other important thing is, who did you need to convince, right? So it would be great, in this case, sound like you need to convince two other EMs. It would be even more impressive if you need to influence and align with their bosses, whether they're senior managers or directors, right? So I would add, I think that's one of the main opportunities to add a little bit more color in terms of actions that you did in terms of negotiating, influencing, and what specifically you did. Why was it complex, and how did you navigate that complexity, and so on. Some of the other things that you can also include is your role in when it comes to setting up, for instance, success criteria. And so I understand this was MVP, and there was a fast follow for the other features and so on. Okay, great. How did you, as part of this, how did you ensure safe delivery? How did you define working with engineering teams and potentially others, product science and so on, to define success criteria for MVP, quickly measure it, get a go, green flag for the next set of things. And as part of that, how did you work with engineering teams to identify and align on the testing and rollout strategy? So those are some of the quick high-level comments. Hope that helps. All right. Thanks again, Pooja, for volunteering. And the next slide here, some of what a good looks like and common pitfalls. So it's important to demonstrate why. And Pooja, I think you did a good job in terms of the why and the kind of background of it. Options. So there's a lot of options, like I mentioned earlier. In this case, Pooja, you covered some of them, so that's good. Data, using data and risk, we talked about that. And documenting a decision or proposal, reviewing it iteratively, and so on. So I think, we talked about that as well. Some of the common pitfalls or potential red flags that commonly occur in these kind of answers are not having an alternative, or simply pushing back without a solution, right? That's one. Another one is, which is the opposite, overcommitting. So being afraid to push back and not demonstrating backbone, and basically overcommitting, which then ends up in a disappointment later on when it comes to missing timelines and so on. Pushing those kind of tasks to others, or blaming engineering and other teams, that's another common one. So you as a TPM, you need to demonstrate ownership and coming up with a solution, some sort of solution quickly, and making sure that these kind of debates and resolution and alignment happen very quickly, because in this particular question, time was of the essence. So those are some of the common pitfalls. Thanks again, Pooja, for volunteering. Let's move on to speed mock number 2. Like I mentioned, all of them will be scenario-based, so how you're going to answer it in terms of the format will be similar. Anyhow, the scenario here is two partner teams disagree strongly. One of them wants to move quickly. The other one insists on a more scalable, robust rebuild and more of a long-term solutions. Meetings are tense and progress is being stalled. And the question is, what would you do specifically in the next 48 hours to unblock the decision and restart the execution? So this very common question for TPMs, could be common question for EMs. Even if you're a PM, you can consider volunteering as well. Some of the competencies that are tested here are, and there is a lot of overlap with the previous one. So in terms of the influencing, conflict resolution, facilitation, one that's, I don't think is mentioned here, but bias for action. So given that a specific question outlines the 48 hours to action, so you need to demonstrate how very quickly you would mobilize the troops, how you would figure out the right get in touch with the right decision makers, form some sort of tiger team, and make sure that you have decision makers in the room in order to identify the path forward quickly. Structure decision making, pros, cons, and objectively evaluating options, and stakeholder management. So even though you have 2 days effectively to make a decision, how do you make sure that the critical stakeholders, at least the core critical stakeholders, are aligned more or less, but also how you communicate and potentially reset expectations with a wider stakeholder audience? Because here there's a lot of other things that could be impacted based on the decision. All right, so we have a few hands raised. I believe, Ravi, you were the first one, so I'll just go with in that order. Ravi, I will give you permission to unmute yourself. So feel free to come on mic and provide your answer whenever you're ready.
All right, sure. Can you hear me?
Sorry, actually, one quick reminder, Ravi, for you and others as well, that we will be volunteering for the other questions. Before providing your answer, if you could just let me know the role and level you're planning to interview for, that's going to help me, because expectations in terms of the bar, what is the bar for answering this question, it varies per role and per level. Hope that helps.
Yep, definitely. Can you hear me, Sanad?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. By the way, you are a rock star, Sanad. My name is Ravi Mudiala. I'm engineering manager at the large national pseudo-government agency, which I cannot name for the obvious reasons. And so we have a very high priority requirement recently that was driven by, I would say, that executive office. So things came and then we were impacted and we had to do that. It came in September and or October rather, and quickly it became into all hands on the deck with 40 people on the call, 20 of them the officers, AVP and then VP levels. And there were several data repository teams that had to get together, and then each of them have to provide their estimates for, or the options to export millions of records from the system that can be passed on to the analyzed and all that. So my system is a records management system, and we did disagree. Two partners teams did disagree. And so from that one, essentially, two options that we had to look into. And the first one, Team A thought they can just export the content by copying all the files from the file system and then going through a more manual process as the quick workaround. And then the Team B is my team, and as leading as the engineering manager, I had to propose different option, but we had to come to a consensus before we move forward. So that's the background and that's the situation. And then the task is to build the consensus and then not stop the progress on the application, right? So here is what I did as the action and then the result. So the first thing is, there are times in the strategic thinking and structured thinking, there is a surface level or a linear thinking, and then there is a multi-level thinking. The multi-level or multi-layer thinking is where the best example that I give, I usually have a graphic. The graphic is an iceberg, where somebody who is looking at a quick workaround is really seeing a tip of the iceberg. And as I was proposing and leading my team as the engineering manager for a more robust option, the intent is to not only show the tip of the iceberg, but goes underneath it almost as layers. So I took option A and then option B as the leader, went through all the problem-solving commandments that I have. So here is the first rule that I have. Whenever I'm in a situation, where there is a conflict on the options, and then I take the lead and then facilitate, and then I take all the participants and stakeholders through a structured decision-making process. So here is my process. The first thing is, there are many times people look at the loud problem, not the real problem. And there are also times people bring in the feelings, not the facts, when solving a problem. And I've seen many times people, there is a saying, don't put the cart in front of the horse, right? So the saying is, don't solutionize the problem before understanding the problem, bringing the clarity to the problem. And there is also one more commandment that I say: think in systems, not in steps. There are many times I have seen with shallow thinking, linear thinking, even the leaders on the other side who propose or proponents of quick workaround, they see the system in steps, not as a system. I mean, they see the process as steps. So once I, like layer by layer, bringing the clarity to the iceberg problem, if the other side is seeing only tip of the iceberg. So I look at both the options, I go through this list, and then I provide the fact. And there are times I have to roll up my sleeves and actually show the options side by side, and kind of remove the fog out of the assumptions and from the problem. So once the other side sees the clarity, there is a saying that I have, that I tell people around me that I'm leading: don't bring clarity to the problem, but not chaos to the problem. You need to take the problem from chaos and complexity to clarity. So that's one example that I have. I was able to successfully show what the other team is missing. We were able to pick the option B that my team proposed. And I'm going to tie this back to the previous Speed Mark 1 as well. The team thought that it's going to take 10 weeks to do it, and we were able to do it in actually 4 weeks. We are the one of the early ones to deliver that. So that's my situation, and the task, and then the actions that we took, and what was the result out of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Ravi. All right, super quick. The feedback. There's a lot of great stuff in your answer. So let's see, starting from top to bottom. I understand the confidentiality given that you work at a government agency. So, but it sounds like there's potential great impact on what you were working on. In case you can share any non-confidential data points in the actual interview, I would do that. Otherwise, it's interviewer comes out of it thinking, okay, well, it could be something very impressive, very critical, very important, or it could be just something that was an internal type of decision, right? So, and you don't need to share it, any of this right now. This is more just for your reference, right? So think about what are some of the non-confidential data points that you could share to demonstrate that impact and complexity of the situation overall. One thing I specifically like, you mentioned there was a call with 40 plus people, including executives on the call. Great. One thing I would follow up there is, okay, how did it go from there to the actual solution and the result and so on, right? Did you need to commit, for example, I understand you needed to resolve conflict with this other EM on the other side, other team, right? But then did you also keep the whole audience of 40 plus folks in the loop? Did you effectively communicate with them? If so, great. Mention that. That is a great data point. And as part of that, also clarify your role when it comes to not just solving that conflict, but overall, how does your role fit into the bigger picture, right? Some of the other things are, by the way, the things that I did that I liked, the you mentioned loud versus real problems and iceberg, and all those were great things. I did have some buts there. I'll get to those in a second. Some of the other potential feedback I had were When it comes to a negotiation, there are some of the common things that you can consider adding. So things like, for instance, at least lining up with the team on what are some of the common goals, what are some of the important factors, at least align on that even before you get into solutioning what's your recommendation versus their recommendation. But talk about what are the metrics that do matter to both teams, what are some of the common goals, and align on the framework when it comes to decision thinking. It's also very important, very critical to understand where the other side is coming from. You might have mentioned a story in case I missed it, but do talk about your effort in understanding where the other team is coming from. I understand, one of them is they want to deliver quickly, but why is that the case, right? Did they have a valid business reason? Was there a certain mandate, legal risk, whatever it is, right? The other comment is, this is more of a general comment in terms of the overall length of the answer. Your answer was about 6-7 minutes. Generally speaking, for behavioral kind of questions like this, you want to aim to 3 to 5 minutes. So your answer was a bit lengthy, and there are certain parts of the answer that you could that could benefit from making more concise. One of them is situation part. I think just on a situation in terms of setting the context and so on, I think it took about solid 2-3 minutes, right? So that's something that you could make a little bit more concise. And another one is when it comes to your philosophy in terms of how you're dealing versus what you actually did, right? So I think that transition could be a little bit faster when you articulating the actions that you took for this particular answer. Some of the other comments that I had were, you mentioned, and I liked how you talked about the analogy used for iceberg and seeing the full picture. But like I mentioned previously, it also could be the other way around, right? Sometimes that iceberg is important, so for that reason, it's so important for you to demonstrate effort to understand the other side, even though it's technically it's inferior, and there could be some long-term concern, there could be operational headaches and so on. Is there a valid reason that outweighs some of those technical concerns and quality concerns that you were calling out, right? So we at least cover that part. I like how you were also talking about loud versus the real problem, and emphasizing on doing the right thing. And this probably wouldn't be concerned for most of the hiring managers, but I did want to call it out just in case, is some managers might come out of it, okay, well, maybe you would be continuously pushing, you would always be pushing for doing the right long-term thing. And if I'm your hiring manager, does that mean that I'm gonna need to spend a lot of my time to convince you to do something, right? Because realistically, now this depends on type of company. Government agencies are different versus startups versus tier 1 companies, but in some environments, you will need to take quick approaches in order to realize or materialize business opportunity and so on. And that means making some technical trade-offs, accepting some technical risk and so on, right? So it's important to demonstrate, again, depending on the type of company they're interviewing for, it is important to demonstrate that balance versus sounding like you're always going to push, no matter what, you're always going to push for doing the right thing from an engineering perspective. But you need to be able to step back and take a look at a bigger picture, right? Again, this might not matter for some of the companies or say government agencies and so on, but for fast-moving environments like startups, certain tier 1 companies, that part will be more emphasized on. And the last comment I had was on the result. It would be good to mention the end result and the impact, right? So kind of circling back to one of my initial comments, I know given the confidentiality of this project and the agency, you weren't able to share a lot of details in the situation part. But if you are able to share more details in the situation part, then you can close the loop and circle back on those in the result and share some of the data points around the impact. Why was it the right decision and so on? Otherwise, one of the follow-up questions I would have is, great, Ravi, was this the right decision in the end? Why? If yes, why so, right? So those are some of the high-level comments. Thanks, Ravi. Hope that helps. Thank you for volunteering. All right. Quickly moving to the things that would looks good for this kind of question versus common pitfalls. So super quickly. some of the things we talked about, aligning on a common goals, constraints, and the framework around making a decision, having decision makers. In cases, hybrid approach might be needed, so some sort of compromise. Common pitfalls are not being decisive enough or moving too slowly, being afraid to step in and propose things that might hurt somebody's feelings, and not taking action fast enough. Taking things personally, obviously, that's another thing to pay attention to. You need to maintain your professionalism and be able to negotiate and use objective data points. Letting conflict go on without escalation. Escalation is, in some cases, are good and expected, right? So if teams are spinning wheels in the sand, and there's simply no way that you're gonna align with somebody else, in some cases, escalating to leadership to get their point of view quickly is needed, and so on. All right, quick time check. I think we only gonna have time to cover one more speed mock instead of two. We have two more, but I think we only gonna have time to cover one. Let's see. Rohan, let me know if, in terms of the time, I know we might be a little bit over a time and might be a little bit late for Ask Me Anything session. So let me know if that's okay.
I think, Isanath, you can take the third question. Then I'll quickly do the interview prep session, interview Kickstart piece, so that people get a breather for like 5-10 minutes. They have been in the session for almost 90 minutes. Then we can straight away move to the AMA after that. You can skip the H1B section.
Okay, so we'll skip H1B session. Sounds great. So here's a speed mock 3. There's also a speed mock 4. I think whoever is volunteering, I'll give folks the opportunity to pick whichever one. Anyhow, I think we have a couple volunteers. Pooja, I believe you already had opportunity to go, and then the next one on the list is Pratik. So Pratik, I'll give you permission to come on mic, and feel free to pick a question, given that we only gonna be able to cover one. So this is the first option, and this is the second question that you can have option to answer. So let me know which one you like to answer, and
I'll go with the mock question 3. That's what I read earlier.
Okay,
and I'll answer
awesome.
from a TPM perspective. See, I think my general philosophy is that change is never bad. How do you deal with the change is more important, right? And a lot of things are generally dependent on your next level of details and so on. So understanding the top priority initiative, why is it top priority? Is it because somebody's bonus depends on it, or there's a business implication to it? Which part of it is important, and so on. And then secondly, you are in middle of your program. How far into the critical path are you? You just want to finish it off and get it off your back, or you're done with the major delivery, and there's this frills of it which are left, and so on. So that's where I think the delicate balance lies. And if you're able to navigate and understand and chip this away in a way that you understand the intake, you understand what you're delivering, and balance both of those things out, you can still work out a plan, inform an incremental delivery, and balance both sides. That's a high level answer I would give.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pratik. All right. So you cover a lot of good things. I like how you emphasize the importance of understanding the priority and so on. One quick feedback is and by the way, this works out given that we are slightly behind the time, but the length of your answer was on the shorter side, and that's fine. I understand this is a high level, and folks, this is not the actual interview. That's perfectly fine. But in the actual interview, you probably want to aim to about 3 to 5 minutes for your initial answer. The answers to follow-up questions will be faster, obviously, and so on, right? So with that, you would, as you are answering it in a 3 to 5 minute time frame, you would probably add more details there around how would you, for instance, what would the process look like in terms of some of the additional details, right? So understanding, not just understanding the new top priority, but also what are the options in terms of potentially descoping that priority. What are the options in terms of meeting the goal or the priority in a different way. Maybe initial scoping was over-engineered, for instance. Maybe there's other ways. Shuffling the roadmap priorities or potentially shuffling the resources. So there's a lot of different options there that you could consider, and that's something that you can add to the answer as well. You mentioned that as you would be working on understanding priority, you were mentioned, does somebody's bonus depend on it? And I understand, fair point, but I would probably use different choice of words there, right? So, something maybe a little bit more politically correct, right? Like, is it team-specific goals and so on, right? Or what they're pushing for, right? And so on, right? The other thing that's also important is when it comes to replanning and communicating changes, it's also important to call out some of the additional. I mentioned some of the additional process things, but how would you, what are the stakeholders that you would identify, critical stakeholders that you will need to loop in at the time of making a decision and making sure they have decision makers? So, who are the folks that need to be aligned before you make a decision? How do you quickly do so, right? And how you organize logistically, those, where it's meetings, maybe you need to write some sort of proposal that outlines, what are the options needed to prioritize this top priority? What are the things that will take a hit? What are the projects that might move below the line, and so on? And then also talk about how would you, once the decision is done and whatever the direction you decided to go, if there was some impacted other initiatives, how do you communicate those effectively, right? How do you make sure that all the stakeholders that were impacted by that decision, that they're involved in a loop and potentially reset expectations and so on. Yeah, so those are some of the super high level comments or feedback from my end. And with that said, I think super quickly, I'm not going to probably go over, in the interest of time, read over all of these, but this gives you a little bit better insight into what good looks like versus common pitfalls for this kind of question. Hope that helps, Pratik. And I think, Rohan, as we chatted, it looks like we're gonna skip the H1 slides in the interest of time, and we're gonna move to AMA session.
Sure. You can stop your screen, Sanat. Just let me make like few call outs. I think folks have been in the session for almost 90 minutes, and you also have been continuously speaking for the last 90 minutes. Maybe grab a water break. Really appreciate you taking all these questions up, giving detailed feedback, being super vigilant. Just let me share my screen once. It's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I think we already have Surit, we already have Sanjeev who has joined in. I think we can just take like a 5-minute breather for everyone for two reasons. One is I'll do like a very small and fast interview kickstart pitch. Folks, we have Sanjeev with us, we have Surit, and we have Sinat, the complete panel for Headstart. Any questions you have for them, be it related to career transition, market sentiments, skills to acquire, any such pieces, right now would be a good time to drop it in the Q&A section. We will pick those questions one by one. We'll try like taking some live as well, but right now would be a good time to drop those. While you're dropping those questions or grabbing a water break, we'll just quickly give you some context. Give me a sec. Where's my screen? Yeah. I hope my screen is visible. Before I take it live, let me quickly share one snippet with you. I think, yeah. So there's another masterclass which we have on 18th of December. If you folks are interested, it is on AI-assisted full stack development. This would be taken by Elias. He is currently a software development engineer at Amazon. It will be a hands-on session. There'll be a demo that he will do. So we're calling it 100x coding. So we'll pick up all the core tools like Claude, Lovable, Cursor, starting to ideate, scaffold, and enhance a real full stack app. So if you folks would want to attend that, want to register for that, drop in a yes. We'd be happy to send you the links for the same. While this poll is on, let me very quickly play a message from a founder, Ryan Willis. Give me a sec.
We cannot hear Rohan.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for the call out, Sanat. I'm not sure what. Oh, yeah, I didn't click on share sound. My bad.
be on top of if you want to. It is the now, and it is the skill that every single person in technology needs to be on top of if you want to survive and also thrive in the next many, many, many years. This AI wave has unlocked unprecedented opportunities for all of us. If you look at all the hiring over the last few quarters, you see that all the growth has really come in AI roles and now increasingly so in AI-enabled roles. Far more importantly, the compensation that we are seeing here, going up to $1 billion in some cases, is unheralded. It's unprecedented and nothing that we've ever seen before. We ourselves at Interview Kickstart are constantly seeing our own alumni who are AI-enabled or have AI and ML skills getting offers, and in many cases are $300,000 to $400,000 more than their peers simply because they have the AI skill set. The challenge, though, is that AI is moving at warp speed. It's moving so fast that it's very difficult to figure out both where to start and how to pick a path that is customized, or to use a word often used these days, fine-tuned for you. That's where we at Interview Kickstart come in. We have built a career acceleration platform that helps you turbocharge your career with AI skills. We've been doing this over the last 12 years, and I've already worked with over 25,000 working professionals from all domains in tech: software, product, data, ICs, managers, and the entire like. Our approach is unique. We believe that the frontier of AI has moved to the world's best companies and the world's best AI labs, which is why we bring together a platform of over 700 instructors, all of whom come from the likes of Google, OpenAI, Meta, Anthropic, and other cutting-edge AI companies. Everything that we bring to you is designed, developed, and delivered live by these professionals. And so they bring their frontier lived experience to every single classroom. We also believe that the world has changed. It has moved from an era of passive learning to now active building. And so in each of our programs, you will get your hands dirty. You will build AI projects, all oriented on helping you build an AI portfolio, because that is what is required today if you want to turbocharge your career. Finally, we realize that there is no one-size-fits-all in AI, and AI really needs to meet you where you are at. And all of us are at different levels, have different experience, have different backgrounds. And so we offer a plethora of courses that is completely flexible. They range from 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, spend more than a year as well, based on your career goal. They're fine-tuned for every domain. We have 18 to 20 domains that we cover. We have separate courses for ICs, separate courses for managers, and we have versions in pro code, low code, and no code. Bottom line, we want to meet you where you are and work with you step by step as you up level to building a fabulous AI career.
So that was a very short and simple message. I'll just quickly, I really don't want you folks to wait for the AMA, just very quickly giving you an understanding of what our offerings are. So we predominantly deal in two categories. One is interview preparation, other is AI upskilling. When it comes to interview preparation, it predominantly caters to folks who want to transition to Tier-1 FAANG plus companies and are currently, let's say, Tier-2, Tier-3 companies, for lack of a better word. So over here, it's extremely personalized based on two key pieces. What are the time frame you're looking at for your next career transition? Along with that, which domain, which career level you are currently at. Step Up is a very accelerated, self-paced course. Level Up is more where you have a bit more time, you're preparing for interviews in your domain, and it's a live class-based course. Interview prep plus AI skills is something which is at the intersection of interview prep and AI upskilling. We call it Edge Up internally. Over here, we help you prepare for interviews. Along with that, we help you build the Gen AI expertise. Whereas we'd also have core AI ML courses where you're looking to transition completely into DAS ML. We have flagship ML and advanced ML. They are more long-term courses with 7 months to 12 months of time commitment. In terms of a pricing, the step-up courses start somewhere around $4,000. Level-up courses start somewhere around 5,500. And Edge Up is again somewhere around 9,000 USD, and flagship ML and advanced are upwards of 9,500. That being said, 4 callouts. One is for folks who are attending the session, there's a special offer that we have on level up and above courses, which is somewhere around 1,500 USD off. So if our program advisors reach out to you and if you are interested in knowing about them, so there's a special 1,500 USD offer that you can avail, which is specific for Headstart folks. We wanted to announce it yesterday, but was pending some approvals. So got that not today. So wanted to call it out. Another piece is in terms of, just one sec, I'm just launching one poll if you're interested in consultation and knowing more about the courses. Second piece is they come with money back guarantee, there's placement assistance, alumni scholarships, and you can enroll now and start anytime. I think these are just the details your program advisors can also share with you when you talk about interview prep courses. They are very domain focused, highly personalized, like what Ryan was also mentioning in the video, like there's no one size fits all. So essentially we do believe in giving courses not just based on your career level or hierarchy where you are currently at, but also based on your domain as well. Similarly, for AI, how we internally envision upskilling is based on what you want to be at and where you currently are at. So when I say where you want to be at, for example, if you're targeting domain-specific roles such as AI SWE, AI product managers, AI AMs, AI TPMs, so we help you with those sorts of transformation as well. If you want to transition to modern ML engineers or deep advanced ML engineers, we help you with courses over there. That being said, these are the basic results that we just want to showcase folks who have gone through our courses. The typical maximum is somewhere around 150K. The typical minimum salary increment is somewhere around 75K, and most of them are currently at FAANG and FAANG Plus companies. So now I'll stop sharing this. Sanjeev, I hope you're also there. I'll straight away move to the Q&A section. So my screen is visible. And there are 2 parts to the Q&A section. There's one quick talk, which we had prepared based on the chat that we had received yesterday. But I'm seeing there are lots of questions already in the Q&A side as well. So I'll pick randomly one by one. To make it streamlined for you, I'll just call out which place I'm picking the question from, and then we can address it. And I'll pick if it's a domain based, I'll pick it up. For example, if it's a management questions and I'll send it your way. If it's data oriented question, I'll send it your way. So then if it's a software question, I'll send it your way, Sanjeev. I think firstly, I'll start with a question from Christina in chat. So the question is something that we also get very often internally, is somebody who is currently in an IC role in a tier 1 company and they want to transition to an EM role. What are the steps to follow this change? Sinath, if you could throw some light at this.
Sure. Yeah, great question. Yeah, common question. Yeah, to start off, keep in mind that transitioning from, and I'm assuming this transition between companies. So you're IC in a current company, you want to a new company as an EM. That transition, especially in tier 1 world, it's very hard because, like I mentioned earlier, tier 1 companies typically expect folks to have industry experience in the role for which they're applying for, right? So if you're applying for EM, typically expectation is even for junior EM roles to have 2-3 years of experience, right? Now, that said, there are some workarounds. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not possible, period, but there are some potential options that you have. The first option, so I'll outline the options, and then based on the options, what are the path forward, what are things to invest your time in, and so on, right? The first option, which is usually the most, the easiest and the natural one, is stay at the current company and work to that for that EM promotion if available, right? I understand not all the companies might have that option for whatever reason, right? Either there's no opportunities or some other reasons, right? But that's one option. Grow from IC to EM in the current company, and gradually, before that transition happens, gradually wear more and more hats that EMs are expected to wear, right? So even as an IC, even as an engineer or whatever the role, right, where it's mid-level or senior engineer, you can help with the roadmap management. You can help with the project execution, mentoring others, working with stakeholders, leading some of the processes where it's a Scrum's operational excellence, backlog groomings, whatever it is, right? So that's option one. Option two is transitioning into a tier one company as an IC and then working toward a promotion internally at that point, right? That could be relatively easy for the first step. I mean, I shouldn't say easy, but very doable. However, the problem with that option is it's going to take a long time to actually move to the EM role, right? So first, you will need to establish yourself as a strong IC and ideally high-level IC. So to move to from IC to manager, typically need to be at least a senior engineer, and you need to gain leadership trust. At the same time, there might be other folks in a team that might be in a queue thinking about the same thing, so it is possible, but a lengthy option, very lengthy potential, right? And the third option is moving from IC to a new company as an EM. Like I mentioned, it's hard, but there are certain companies that, especially tier 2, tier 3 companies and certain startups that might be open to that, to those type of candidates, especially if you demonstrate through your resume, through the interview, that you've been leading either some sort of tech lead or even unofficial EM, that you've been dotted line managing folks, more junior folks, and so on, right? At the same time, there are some tier one companies like ByteDance, for instance, that does have this notion of tech lead manager type of roles where you're 50% hands-on, so doing everything that I see you as an engineer would be expected to do, and 50% people manager. Those kind of roles are easier, obviously, to transition. Many startups, given that there's different levels of startups, but a lot of startups do expect managers to be hands-on. So those could also be good opportunities for that easy transition, right? Now, whichever option you do pick, what I would suggest is, if you know for sure that your North Star is becoming EM, start, if you haven't already started doing so, make sure that you are investing your time and picking up EM opportunities, EM tasks, or other words, tasks that typically EMs are expected to do, right? So help your manager, see how you can help your manager in leadership in terms of, like I mentioned, roadmap planning, project execution, taking complex tasks, delegating, breaking into smaller, more executable pieces, delegating them to more junior engineers, mentoring, get yourself involved in the hiring, process improvements throughout the teams, be that force multiplier, raise the bar overall across the team, and make sure that way that you are earning leadership trust. So that way, when the opportunity in your current workplace does open up, ideally you want to be first in line, right? But even if that doesn't happen for whatever reason, that gives you more data points and experience to talk about in the interview process if you do apply externally, and things to mention in a resume as well. A resume is an important thing here because the first step, the first challenge will be landing the EM interview, right? So it's important that even though your title might be IC, or IC type of title, make sure that in your summary and in terms of your what you'll be doing most recently, that it comes out very clear what are some of the EM tasks, types of tasks that you've been driving and so on, right? And similarly, make sure that's reflected in a LinkedIn and other roles as well. Sorry, in other places as well. And then the last one, like I mentioned, it's important to focus on the right type of companies, right? Certain companies like Amazon, for example, it's going to be straight no, right? But there are some other potentially some tier 1 companies that do have these tech lead managers. There could be a lot of tier 2, tier 3 companies, and more specifically startups that are open to these kind of candidates. So that's on. I don't want to take too much time, but I hope that helps.
No, that really helps. That's a very elaborate answer, Sanad. Thank you so much for that. I think just sticking to that transition oriented theme as of now. One question for you, Suraj, which is what we often see internally as well, folks in the non-ML background.
Right.
What should someone coming from a non-ML background focus on first to break into a data or ML roles? This predominantly comes from two fronts. One is the context is people who are not in non-ML background, there's a general thought right now, and at least that's what we see, general sentiment, that you to future-proof your career, to stay relevant, if you get into core ML roles, you'll have like much longer career longevity, nothing against any other domain or so. This is one. And second is people are actually curious. This comes from somebody who are early in their careers as well. How do they get into core ML roles, core data roles? Even if their education background is not ML data specifically, what should be the path that they chart out?
Right. So no, I think this is a very good an insightful question and a complex one to answer, to be very honest. But here's what I would do if you come from a non-ML background. Like, um, I personally, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, but then I did a lot of computational modeling, computational mathematics, numerical fluid mechanics, and stuff like that, which has a lot of formulations of statistical based learning methods for solving a problem in the mechanical engineering domain. And so, what I would do if you're coming from a non-ML background, if or transitioning into ML, is something like use your domain to your advantage. Let's say you're working in a supply chain company as a demand planner. Now, demand planning can be um, um, done better. Most of the supply chain demand planners would probably have their legacy models. They would use maybe some software like JDA to do their demand planning. But maybe you can start leveraging some state-of-the-art forecasting algorithms, planning algorithms, and create a framework within your company to show how you can improve their basic processes by enabling or embedding ML into their framework. And so this is just one example of how you can leverage your current domain expertise and start building up a portfolio of ML based business use cases. That is the first thing that I would do. So get your domain expertise and embed your ML, try to embed ML knowledge into your domain expertise. The second thing that I would say, let's say the second type of roles that uh, I see where folks want to transition from those into MLs is something like data engineering, data analytics, business analytics, and it's mostly focused on pure SQL, relational databases, querying, creating dashboards, and then they want to like go and transition into ML. The way I would target those roles is also, for example, if you are generating insights, can those insights be generated using an ML model instead of like just doing aggregations and dashboarding associated with the data? Can you elicit some more information? Maybe you want to study customer churn, maybe you want to do A/B testing or experimentation. Can you embed some machine learning methods for addressing those questions as well? And finally, so that's the data analytics to ML engineer is the second transition. And then the third one that I see is a general DevOps or software engineer to an ML engineer. And that actually is because you're already very strong at coding and software infrastructure piece, that can transition very well to like a ML infra role where you are responsible for managing the infrastructure, making the tech system level design decisions associated with the ML infra. And those are some of the things that I would try to focus on to essentially keep your career, maintain a career longevity, and just keep your career future proof. Essentially, what I'm trying to say here is that one important thing in which I've noticed over and over is just learning how to learn. Learning how to learn is something which is very important. And if you're able to identify what are the current trends, what are the state of the art techniques which are being implemented out there, and how do those things enable me to do my job well in my domain, be it healthcare, hospital management, supply chain analytics, software, all of those. How can I like identify a problem and how can I use ML to solve this problem better? Those are the types of things, if you can leverage, you can build a case of how you have owned a particular project and how you have like done so at a smaller company and why you would therefore succeed at a tier 1 or a FAANG company as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Surit, for that answer. I think gave a lot of different snippets on different career paths as well within that. So thank you so much for that, layering that into the answer as well. Again, sticking to the transition theme, one from the software side, Sanjeev, over to you, is a lot of folks yesterday, especially during your session, when you're talking about different career paths, different interview processes for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 companies. So it was more around, let's say somebody's in a tier 2, tier 3 company as of now, and they want to up for lack of a better word, upgrade to a new company. It's more about having that better brands on their resume. Could be from any other motivation. How should people go about transitioning from a tier 3 company to, let's say, a FAANG Plus company, and somebody especially who are like mid senior level or like have like 5 to 7 years of experience in software engineering?
Yeah, sure. So I think the way I would look at this question is I would start by looking at what exactly does a tier 1 company need, right? And what do I have? And this answer is going to be different for different people and different companies. But at a high level, the kind of things that, you know, I, I would, in general expect people to have to focus on is I'm going to highlight just off, like I'm going to think out loud and kind of list some thoughts that come to mind. In terms of coding, let's say, the code has to be the it's a given. It's a minimum requirement that your code has to be clean and understandable, right? That's a given. But in addition to that, let's say if you're talking about a coding interview, you want to focus on skills such as clear communication. They're not like these tier 1 companies are not looking to hire coders. They're looking to hire engineers and problem solvers, which means getting your code out there or having a solution is a minimum condition, not a sufficient condition. And so there's other things like, hey, communicate it clearly, show leadership, show system level thinking like trade-offs or costs, right? Time complexities, space complexities. That should be like first order thinking. So that's from a coding perspective, but look at it from say a system design perspective. Again, similar things, communication definitely is important. In fact, communication, I'm going to stop saying that because it's a horizontal signal that's going to apply to everything, right? But for system design thinking, like, are you showing, are you talking about, like, first of all, let's go in chronological order. Like, are you talking about clarifying requirements, right? You're given a prompt. Do you immediately start designing something or coming up with a solution? That would be probably a red flag, right? So making sure you understand what is being asked, which means you have to have clarifications done, and then when you design your solution, you want to show that you are proactively. Proactively is key, right? Don't wait for them to ask you. You're proactively talking about trade-offs and failure scenarios, right? These are the kind of things that are going to differentiate say a senior engineer from a junior engineer. A junior engineer is just going to spurt out solutions, and that's okay. That's what we expect from them. They don't have a lot of experience, but from a senior engineer, you are thinking more systems level thinking. Hey, I know this is a great solution, but I know things are going to fail, right? And this is what we do in failures. And so then that kind of takes you back to the basics of in the case of system design, all the system design patterns that we kind of briefly mentioned in one of the sessions, I think yesterday or a couple of days ago or whatever. So all that familiarity, right? So because again, the kind of things that the tier 1 companies are looking at is uh, they're dealing with a lot of ambiguity. They're dealing with a lot of scale and high speed projects, fast fail, whatever. And so they're looking for people who can take their responsibility and they can be delegated with the work and then reasonable confidence and that is going to get done. So I don't know, does that make sense?
It does. It does. I'm just not sure if I'm. Yeah, it does. Sanjeev, thank you so much for that answer. Um, so now, although it's like a similar question to what was answered earlier, but I think there's somebody, Constantin, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. They're still live with us. There's a question from them. They're an engineering director at a consulting firm managing 200 plus engineers globally. Is it realistic for them to transition to as an EM role at FAANG in the current market? Constantly, would you want to like, Sinat, would you be okay taking it live if they are willing to? Because I'm very sure there must be a lot of some apprehension, some context that is missing from this question to better address it. If they are willing to ask you this question, I would you be open to that?
Yeah, sure. You want me to answer it again, or
Yeah, let me hear it from him. Constantine, would you please raise your hand again if it's okay? Just one sec. Yeah, allowing you to talk, man. Feel free to shoot a question. Would be great if you could add some context to it. Hey, can you hear us?
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yep.
can hear you loud and clear, man.
Issues with microphone. Yeah. Thank you very much for this meeting. Yeah, I have a question. I'm working as an engineering director now. I implemented different ERP and CRM systems in a consulting company. And I'm managing several engineers, about 200 here in US and in Latin America and in India. And but I'm willing to transition to big tech companies. From your experience, did you saw such transitions in the past? So from consulting company to big tech, I'm okay lowering the position. I understand that it will be not possible to go engineering director in consulting to engineering director in FAANG. But did you at least saw this in the past, and what do you
Great.
think is possible in the future?
Yeah, great question. The short answer is yes. However, there are some challenges, right? And for instance, some of the common concerns that I see, EMs or directors or whatever the role from the consulting or vendor environment transitioning into the tier one are typically in a consulting company. The culture is different, right? You typically are hired by clients to deliver some sort of software, some sort of solution. You ship it and then you move to the next thing, right? At big tech, you're gonna own things. Typically, you're gonna own things long term. So you're gonna develop systems, you're gonna own them, maintain them, evolve them, enhance them, and so on, right? And because of that, what typically candidates coming from consultancy lack is the strategic thinking. So need to make sure that you brush up on those things and that that the vision, working with a product on a strategy, coming up with a long-term architectural strategy, say 3-year plans and so on, those kind of things don't the concerns, right? The other thing, like you mentioned, which is common, is down leveling. Down leveling is very common, especially in current environment. Even years ago, for instance, when I was hiring EMs at Amazon, oftentimes I would hire directors at certain companies. They will be accepting line manager roles at Amazon, right? I mean, there's a lot of drivers, compensation, also the type of work, the scope, and the impact. There's a lot of different things there. I like, the scope that you have is significant. 200 people, great. Even if all those are contractors and maybe not all of them are reporting to you, so that's great. One of the things that you can explore is, again, depending on the organizational structure and this 200, if you manage as part of those 200, I assume that you also manage a large number of managers, right? Not all 200 report directly to you. You manage a large number of managers. So as part of that, you can also explore manager roles as well. Again, keep in mind that there's going to be some down leveling. 200 is a significant number at Amazon, for example. That's well into the director territory as well, right? However, because you're coming from the consulting, it's going to be immediate down leveling to senior manager, which is managers. It could be 50 plus folks and so on, right? Or even line manager. But it depends on the nuances of this 200. What does the organizational structure look like? What is the impact? What are the kind of things that you work on, and so on, right? So the short answer is yes. Definitely possible. Keep in mind also that if you would be down leveled, that you need to brush up on some of the more tactical things. System design, for example, is going to be one of the obvious ones. Since you're director managing 200, probably it's been a while since you got down into the, say, low-level system design. So that'll be one of the things to brush up on and so on, right? And some of the other things I would like to call out, and this is more kind of along the lines, the common reasons why folks fail, especially whether it's coming from consultancy or tier 2, tier 3 companies. And some of that this is also helps, I think, answering the previous question that we had. Keep in mind, tier 1 companies typically have different culture, right? So you, especially as a manager, you're gonna be owning a lot of things, right? You own everything from start to finish. You own not just delivering, but the maintenance of things, mandates, filling in those mandates, evolving, working closely with the product, defining the product strategy. So the culture is different as part of that. Typically, they tend to be very fast-moving environments, right? Meaning, at the times there's gonna be extra hours needed. There's also a high bar in terms of operational excellence. on calls and aggressive SLAs. So the culturally things are different. So it's important to brush up on a culture and make sure that culture doesn't come up as a concern. Down level is a comment. I mentioned that. One of the other things that, and this is more of a concern that might come up in things like system design, is if you're coming from tier 2 or tier 3 company or a consultancy, a lot of your work might be involving legacy systems and legacy technology. That's fine, but brush up on a new technology because some of the having that knowledge will be important in solving system design. So latest technology when it comes to streaming, processing a large volume of data at scale. What are some of the new concepts and so on, right? So brush up on those things. A lot of the companies that I've seen candidates, they work with technology that is been around for 10, maybe 20 years, and that then immediately it's a handicap for you. And then the other thing, I think this is more important for the I guess the previous question for the person I see interviewing for applying to interview for the IC role at Tier 1. And plus one to everything that Sanjeev said, one additional thing I would like to add there is what I commonly see for IC candidates there that they lack is articulating why they're a force multiplier and why they were, especially if you say a mid to senior level, how you're a force multiplier leading a mentoring chunk of the team and making sure that it doesn't come out as you're just one of the members of the team, but you are actually leading a chunk of the team, leading your SME and leading a certain charter of the team, one way or the other, and so on. I'll keep it there. Hope that helps.
Constantine, hope you addressed your answer.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Coming to the next one, Suraj, with you, I think this one is a very specific question. It's a two-parter. One is yesterday, somebody, like 2-3 were asking when we were predominantly doing software engineering session with Sanjeev, though. But a lot of people were asking, like, how important is lead code for ML or AI engineers today? This was one. And second is just in general, while you yourself as like have an extensive experience in machine learning, while interviewing or in general, what do you see where do most experienced data or ML in candidates often fall short when interviewing or when trying to crack creme de la creme roles?
Yeah, so I think based on my experience, at given my recent interviews at some of the big tech companies last year, and some startups, and some of the interviews that I took when I was hiring last year, the importance of lead code type of question was just what it was for the last 5 to 6 years, where essentially if it's a big tech, FAANG plus type of companies, typically you have like a coding round, maybe two coding rounds where you are asked like either easy to medium lead code type of questions. Then you have a system design round or ML system design round for machine learning engineers. Then you have a behavioral round, and after that you have a bar raiser round. Typically, if you have like if they want to make a leveling decision. So there's some medium level importance for lead code, at least until last year. This year, in 2025, I think some companies, I think Meta, for example, is allowing folks to use GPT or Copilot in their process. So I don't know how that has changed the style of their particular questions, but some companies don't allow AI usage in the interviews, and so for them it's largely the same. For smaller startups, or where they require domain expertise, I have seen a little bit lower importance on lead code type of like coding muscle, but but that doesn't mean coding there is not important. Actually, I've seen more importance on fleshing out and like fleshing out an end-to-end story associated with a data set, associated with a problem. So in fact, you are responsible for defining the problem, finding the question that you want to answer, proving that or defending that why is this question something that is important that needs to be answered, and then actually creating a solution for that. So that is something that I have seen happen at some of the smaller startups, or even medium-sized, around 50 to 100 people startups type of an environment. And from a role perspective, for like data scientists in general, I've seen a slightly lower focus on writing extremely performant performance efficient code as opposed to ML engineers. ML engineers typically they want you to be proficient in writing optimized code. So that's the differences that I've seen so far when it comes to the importance of lead code for ML AI data scientists with big tech and some of the startups. So that's my that's my answer for question number one. For question number two, where do experienced data scientists fall short or even experienced ML candidates fall short? I know this sounds like a very cliche answer, but I do think it's communication. I have rejected a lot of folks who have extremely strong resumes, who have worked in very successful startups, tier 1 companies as junior engineers, and they're applying for a senior engineer or a manager one role. And what I've seen is because they're used to a lot of different techniques, a lot of different AI infrastructure, a lot of different algorithms that they have used in their current job. A lot of the times what happens is a moment they see a question, a moment they see a problem, because they have this hammer, this tool, a hammer as a tool, every problem for them is a nail. So even if you require a machine learning or AI solution for this problem or not, they deviate towards AI or LLMs or Gen AI for solving this particular problem. When in fact, sometimes I deliberately ask a question which is where the answer is almost always deterministic and you don't need to use AI. And so what I like to see there is, can you communicate the pros and cons of different approaches that you know, and when and where to use what approach? And that is something that I've seen experienced data scientists or machine learning engineers fall short with, which is defending their decision to use AI or not in some of the business problems that they have solved, and then really communicating that impact all the way to the business. Typically, when they deploy a machine learning model, they would focus on the model metrics, the model pipeline, the model monitoring, but that final piece of how did that model impact the business? Why were your stakeholders happy with it? What would you have improved if you were given more time? Those are the things which are not that loop is not closed, and that is something which I feel is a little bit lacking from some of the experienced folks.
Thanks, Surat, for the answer. I think just picking on cues from what you were addressing, especially on the first part around lead code, relevance of lead code, for lack of a better word. So just picking from that, you mentioned like tools like Copilot, how are they changing things? And the Meta example where Meta is allowing people to use different, I'm forgetting, even I read that article, there's some tools they can use to code in the coding rounds as well. They can leverage those tools. Sanjeev, the question to you, specifically from coding standpoint. With the rise of AI tools like Copilot, do you see the role of coding evolving in interviews for software engineering roles? This is one. Are you seeing any changes so far? Along with that, I think there's somebody who's interested to know yesterday, like a very specific thing. Can they use in FAANG Plus companies? Are they allowed to use whiteboards, especially on virtual interviews? What have you seen? Just your thoughts on this.
Okay, let me address the second part first. Use of whiteboards. So actually, maybe I don't completely understand the question, but whiteboards are. Can you guys still hear me? Yeah, it looks
We
like.
can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, because I think the power went out. So, yeah, so whiteboards are still there, right? Um, and yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a change there. But maybe I'm misunderstanding the question there, that part. Uh, Now, the first part, how has Copilot changed? Um, so coding is still important, right? With Copilot or any other AI help coming in, some companies are, and it's a changing field, right? It's a changing field. It's relatively new. I know Meta has made some changes, but from a perspective of coding, I think there's more focus on, or let's say there's less focus on churning out, let's say, earlier back in the day, we'll say, hey, here's a string and you need to do parsing on this string to figure out various fields. There's less focus on that likely now, but more of given a prompt and a possible AI-enabled AI assisted solution, how can you explain what you have? Show system level thinking, show if there's an issue with the code, like if there's abstractions needed for long-term maintainability, et cetera, can you think along those lines, right? So that still means it doesn't mean coding is not relevant. It still is, because unless you understand coding, you're not going to be able to answer any of these other things built which they build on top of coding, right? You may not actually be writing the code, or maybe you're writing much lesser code than before, but then you need to understand what's there, what AI has given to you to be able to then say, hey, this is what we have. And these are the areas where I think, I would invest more time, or, maybe modularize it, or things like that, right? Think of it as, maybe this is an analogy. Let's say you are doing coding review, right? Some engineer gave you the code, sent out a PR, and you're looking at it and you're making suggestions, right? So if a person doesn't understand coding and hasn't done that before, it would be very hard for them to give any reasonable suggestions. So yeah, I mean, coding is still important. It's just that maybe you're not writing tons and tons of code, but then uh, stepping up and advising on a higher level aspect of it. Again, this is a changing field. Not all companies are following this yet, but my gut feel is it is moving in that direction, and more companies will follow, and it's going to evolve.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sanjeev, for this. I think if there's any small nuggets, scenarios, so whether you want to add from TPM, EM perspective or data perspective with regards to trends on AI tools in specific domains, maybe Sinad, would you want to take a stab at it first?
Sure, yeah, and plus one to what Sanjeev mentioned, it's definitely moving slowly in that direction. It's still, I would say, minority of the companies that are using this kind of format of interviews where you have some sort of AI assistant, right? But there is a more emphasis on prompting and working with AI assistant effectively, and then still being able to understand what is being generated, why, and so on, right? In terms of EM and TPM roles, there's going to be a little bit less, or at least those data points typically would be less collected in the interviews, unless there will be coding runs for you as an EM, for instance. But there will be what will be covered. What's more likely to be covered is how do you more kind of general kind of questions, either about examples or general kind of questions. How do you use AI in terms of increasing productivity within your team? How do you keep the bar high? How do you make sure that your team is equipped in terms of AI knowledge and so on? In case you will be working or managing teams that are closely related to the AI and that have significant AI components, then there would be more specific tech-related questions around the AI and even including the system. Like, so what are some of the specific AI considerations you might be considering in a system design, and so on. So that's in general on a high level. Yeah, hope that helps.
Thanks. So do you want to add anything from the data perspective with regards to tools?
Yeah, so I think from the EM again, plus one to both of the previous answers, I think as I mentioned, a lot of the time what is happening with these tools like co-pilots and AI assistants is that if you know your craft well, like if you know the fundamentals of programming as a paradigm for solving problems, you are able to make solid judgments on how to improve the code that the AI has produced, why you are writing that code in the first place, how you will be able to diagnose or detect some of the bottlenecks in the code. You are able to make those judgments, you are able to make those comments on the code very well. From a EM, that's like a lot of the times EMs typically don't write code on a day-to-day basis, but they definitely do review a code on a regular basis. And having a strong foundation in this philosophy of programming or abstractions around programming and design patterns in different types of programming is something that becomes more and more important when you rise higher. Why are you making certain design choices in your code base? And those are the things, if you want to be able to, like, most of us can write a algorithm to sort numbers in the ascending order one way or the other. Some of us will write it in a brute force manner, some of us will write the most performant code. But how should you take an input? How should the input be structured? Should it be a list of numbers? Should it be like numbers which are represented in a dictionary format? Like, how do you create this system design that this should be your input, this should be your output, the main code algo is so and so? Design decisions like this require what they call design patterns in software engineering. And knowing more and more about these design patterns comes through learning the abstractions and foundations of programming in general. And that is the skill I believe is going to become more and more important, because the coding part can be done or assisted with fairly easily using these AI tools. But this higher level design choice, given your problem domain on why you are building a code base out a certain way, is something that is not quite readily solvable by AI, because only you and your proprietary company peers have the context around how you are designing the entire system. And so knowing that context well and then being able to use these AI tools and critique the responses well is something that is going to be very relevant for EM roles, engineering manager roles. For tech, I think you also mentioned TPM, right? Like for tech product managers, how these tools will change. I think for TPM roles, I have less experience because I have only interacted with tech product managers from a stakeholder perspective. Like, they were the stakeholders and I was the engineering manager in this case. But from what I envision, even TPM roles are going to be impacted in a way that a lot of the proof of concepts, if a product manager has an idea about a website or a product or an app looking a certain way, I think there's no system design or code review question in this case. You can create some bare bones skeleton code that the AI will generate for you and show a proof of concept, as opposed to a written Word document, and everybody has to imagine your idea that you have created. So there can be some changes in those type of roles as well. Um, but I have a short answer for the TPM role, because I haven't functioned as a product manager. But for the EM, that's my perspective on how these AI tools will change it.
Thanks, Harad, for detailed context and detailed answer. Asana, I think for management, I think it's all transition-related questions that I'm seeing so far. So I'm just, if it like, I know you have addressed the same question again and again, but again, I think these questions also become very profile specific. For example, Vanita here had a question, like she assuming like they have been a QA manager for almost 12 years, or they have 12 years of experience, technically 15 years, with 2 years ML break, they may have taken some time for upskilling. And is it possible for them to move to TPM or EM?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, the short answer is yes. Whenever you're transitioning from a one role to the other where there is significant overlap, and in this case, there is significant overlap between QA manager and TPM, right? Because a lot of things that I would expect from TPM to do in terms of the program management, project management, stakeholder communication, driving projects, identifying success metrics, and so on, right? For related to projects and programs. Probably to some capacity, hopefully you've been doing as a QA manager, right? And similarly, QA manager to EM, there's a lot of overlap there as well, as a people manager, right? And as everything else. The key is when you say QA manager, I mean it depends on nuances there, what exactly you've been doing as a QA manager and how much your time and bandwidth you've been spending for some of the project management or program management aspects of it, right? Versus say non-QA specific domain. And for instance, did you stay specifically on testing and test automation and those kind of things, or did you have high exposure to some of the other aspects of software development, right? So answers to those questions will decide, are you closer to, and do you have better shot at a TPM versus EM? But the short answer is yes, it's definitely possible because again, there's a lot of overlap. And how you can approach it, it's you have kind of like in one of the previous questions I mentioned, you basically have three options on a high level, right? Either doing transition internally within an existing company, if there's such opportunity, right? Or moving to other company as a QA and then doing transition internally there, or moving from as a QA to TPM or EM, right? How close you are in specifically that last option, moving as a QA to say EM role and switching company at the same time. It depends on how much data points you have and evidence around you functioning in EM role, right? So especially if maybe your title, for instance, is QA manager, but maybe you are managing some software engineers, right? Or maybe you've been leading some of the projects that are not necessarily just QA or testing related, right? So the more data points you have, like as such, the better chance you have, right? And it's important to articulate those things and make sure they're rightly represented in resume, LinkedIn profile, and so on. Because typically the first hurdle there, which is a significant one, is landing the interviews, right? Because hiring managers and recruiters, the moment they see somebody in a different role, and especially if they have 100 applicants, then it's an easy no, right? So you want to make sure that you are highlighting those things appropriately in your resume and so on. So yeah, the short answer, definitely possible, but the first step would be identifying what are your gaps relative to each role, relative to TPM and relative to the EM, and see which one, to which one are you closer, and then look at some of the other things like what is your North Star, right? What are you passionate about? What are you trying to optimize? Do you want to stay on a people management aspect, right? If so, great. EM is more natural role. Or are you prioritizing getting into Tier-1 company period, meaning that you might be open to both? In that case, maybe TPM might be easier, right? Depending on the details of your QA experience and so on. I hope that helps. I want to keep it a high level and brief, but please let me know if you have any clarification questions that might be specific to your situation.
Sure. Next one is again like one more another on the transition. Not going to take any more transition questions for sure. Somebody with 13 years delivery manager in product company. Again, I think this is more coming from a sentiment of like the longer you stay in a company for a long duration, you feel out of touch with current technologies. You become very fixated with what are the processes, tools, etc. being used in that specific company. So they're saying they feel out of touch with current technologies and aren't sure whether to pursue a senior manager, TP, or product owner role. Which path would make the most sense for somebody who has been in a product company for 13 years as a delivery manager?
Yeah, a good
If you have any
question.
2 cents about it.
One thing that I will assume here is when you say delivery manager, it could mean different things at different companies. So typically, delivery managers are in a way functioning as some sort of either program or a TPM role where the focus is, instead of managing project, the whole life cycle, the focus is specifically on the delivery, deployment, releases, and so on, right? So assuming that's the case or something around that, transition to TPM might be the easiest and the more natural one, right? Because in a way, a lot of things that you're doing are TPM related. However, one downside is given that you are a delivery manager, you are focused in one specific phase of software development versus as a TPM, typically you expected to have a little bit broader view and experience there, right? Some of the common concerns that I see in candidates that I've been working with that are coming from delivery management experience, they're trying to move to TPM. System design is the main one, for example, right? Because as a delivery manager, you don't care about how something has been delivered, what architectural trade-offs have been made, how they even how they tested it and stuff like that. But what are you optimizing and what do you care about is it released successfully? Is there going to be in terms of multiple things going to release? Are there going to be some conflicts, and how are you going to run maybe simultaneous experiments so on top of it, and overlapping experiments and so on, right? So those are some of the things that are that delivery managers commonly fail in. So make sure that you brush up on the other aspects of software development. Again, system design is the main one that is very common that folks very commonly fail coming from delivery manager experience. The other one is working with engineering teams on the whole life cycle, project life cycle, right? So meaning getting from the very first step, which is working with the product on understanding requirements, defining, maybe negotiating some of the P0s versus P1s, what is MVP, and so on, and then all the way to the release and post-release, right? So keep, that said, delivery management is probably 10% of the thing, right? So you want to make sure that you brush up on the best practices on the other 90%. To get experience in the other 90%, it's not overnight thing, right? However, at least what you can do is brush up on the best processes and mechanisms and industry standards when it comes to managing those other aspects of a software development, and ideally start applying it if there's an opportunity to start applying it in your current environment. Great, but if not, at least you have theoretical knowledge and you can at least on a high level answer some of the interview questions and so on, right? So I would prioritize understanding that broader aspect and as that will both help you situating or positioning yourself for potential internal promotion to TPM or interviewing with external companies for TPMs. Hope that helps. The other thing, sorry, the one other last thing that I forgot to mention is for titles that are kind of sort of similar, but they're not the same. So, for instance, your title is delivery manager. You interviewing for TPM. There are different titles. However, there might be a lot of overlap. It's important in your LinkedIn resume and so on to make sure that you are very clear about. Even though your title is different, what are some of the things, additional things in the TPM world that you've been working on, right? Even though your primary focus might be on delivery, maybe you do have significant experience in system design, working in engineering teams on the solution part of it, testing, coming up with the testing strategy, really, release strategies. You would probably have that. So make sure that you are listing all those others, and the more you list, the less potential concerns there are for hiring managers. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Anand. Sanjeev, over to you for the next question. I think Chetan has said that. Thank you. I think address this question. Again, Sanjeev, like coming from a very basic lens, let's say for software engineers predominantly, coding is definitely the core piece. But somebody who has coding skills, etc., covered, and they are focusing on senior software engineer roles, what should they focus on apart from coding, and any specific skills that you see are gaining more traction in the market right now?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess
And don't say communication. I think that's a theme, by the way. Just like just not a joke, fan. Communication has to be there, but
yeah,
apart
that
from
has
that,
to be there. Yeah, I mean that's kind of a horizontal signal. But
yeah.
for senior, this is targeting like senior C roles or senior plus roles. I think what I'm gonna say is what I want people to think about is, and this is of course I'm following the question exactly because it's saying basic coding is already covered, right? So that part's taken care of. What else is important? System design, but that was already covered by me and I think Surad and Sanad. We all three of us mentioned system design as a very important piece of it. But I will also add one more, which I think indirectly or directly Sanad and Surad are also mentioned earlier, which is you need to have stories from your past experience that show that you are at a senior or a staff or a principal, whatever the level it is that you're targeting, which means when you are preparing for interviews, be clear in your mind what level you're targeting. Are you targeting senior, staff, principal? And then once you know what level you're targeting, what are the requirements for that? That is, that's commonly available information, right? What kind of signals, what kind of stories you need. Then go prepare those stories, from your past experience. And this is gonna come into the behavioral interviews also, but also flow into, the technical interviews potentially, but primarily behavioral. And what's gonna happen is, like, if you can come up with stories that showcase the skills that are needed for that level, awesome. Write them down, prepare, talking through that, make sure you understand, remember all the details, because you don't want to be in a situation say, oh, you know what, this was 3 years ago and I don't remember the details. Well, they don't care. It just shows that you didn't prepare. And if you don't remember the details, don't use that example. Use an example where you do remember the details, which means you need to prepare for role appropriate uh, stories so that you can send that signal. Uh, and I think we all know that behavioral interviews are some of the most underprepared interviews that candidates do. They focus more on coding, system design, et cetera, all the technical aspects. And for behavioral, people think, oh, I worked on that project. I'm the one who worked on it, so of course I understand it very well. I can talk through it. Sure, you can talk through it in a conversation in a cafeteria or coffee, I'm sure, right? But in an interview, it's focused time. You have, like, I don't know, less than 5 minutes to clearly communicate and send out the signal. Can you do that, right? Most people cannot do that until they're prepared. Yeah, I mean, there might be some people who can do it without preparation, but that's not the majority. So after basic coding is covered, I would say, make sure you understand, focus on system design, and make sure you focus on sending the right signal for the level that you're targeting, which means preparing for your stories from your past life. And those stories can be from your work life as well as from your college, depending on how, if somebody's 25 years out of college, likely a college story is not that relevant, right? But the point I'm trying to make is, depending on how many years you've been out of college, you could potentially use a college story, or maybe you're working on some open source outside of the work project or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Sanjeev, for this question. Next one is, I would go back to Sinad once. Sinad, I think the lens for this question, I would say, is more on certification. Like, for example, somebody who is in a certain role, they add additional signals on the resume, on the CV through certification. And the analogy that they've given is PMP certification for banking or project management roles. Are there any specific certifications that you think are really valued today when it comes to management roles in engineering? If there are, what would those be?
Yeah, good question. Generally, I would say no. Certifications definitely help from the resume perspective, and it might be one of the factors if, I don't know, if a recruiter is on the fence and so on, right? They would be more relevant if you are applying for a very specific domain, a very specific industry, very specific domain. So, for example, if you're a product manager, applying for I don't know, something in fintech, and there might be some fintech related certification. Great. Similarly for TPM, I think certifications for roles like TPMs might be helpful to compensate for lack of, especially in cases to compensate for lack of experience for TPM. So, for example, one of the previous questions we had, delivery manager trying to interview for a TPM. Okay, you don't have maybe a full TPM experience, but maybe you get a TPM certification in the TPM space, right? So it can compensate and help for some of those things. However, so it helps with can help in some cases when it comes to the resume and overall landing the interviewing. But in the interview process itself, at that point, interviewers are going to rely more on the signals that they're picking up, not less about what kind of certification you have, but more about how you answer a behavioral question, your experience, your thought model, mental model on approaching certain problems, and so on. I hope that helps. So the short answer is, yeah, it can help in specific situations, but typically even though it does help, what I've seen is typically it's a lesser weight than some of the other things.
But it's not needle mover, is what you're trying to say.
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm saying it's not a needle mover, is what you're trying to say. It may add a certain small weightage, but not the core thing that one should focus on if they are preparing for
Yeah.
management roles or engineering manager
Sure.
roles?
Yeah, exactly. Now, there could be some nuances. Again, like I mentioned, somebody has lack of experience as TPM. Okay, great. Having a certificate is a strong signal to help compensate for lack of something. And then also the other one is if you are interviewing for a very specific domain,
Yeah.
and in some cases, actually, in a job description, you would see that nice to have would be having certificate in a specific domain, specific technology, and so on. If that's the case, awesome, great. It can be it can be a very helpful needle mover, but those are rare.
Well, I'll just have like at least one question specifically in mind for all of you, apart from that, but like just emphasizing on the fact that all of us have been mentioning that communication is super important, and there's one key thing that we clearly see internally is people don't even adhere to STAR framework, which is very basic when it comes to FAANG interviews. Are there any specific communication frameworks that you folks really follow or seen working really well in interviews, and not just in interviews, in general, day-to-day meetings, catch-ups that you should really showcase your great communication ability on the candidates front? Anybody can take a stab at it. Yeah,
I can take a stab and then other people can add. But I think some of the commonly known ones are the star format, right? But then there's also star L, where L is the learning part. But personally, I think it doesn't matter whether you follow star or something else. But the thing is, your communication has to be clear. You understand what you're saying very well. The goal is that the person who's listening to you should have a good mental image of what you're trying to tell them. Okay, well, start helps. Yeah, sure. Situation, task, action, result, and then learning. What did you learn from there? So that's a good one to add. Sometimes what happens is, when you want more impact or when you have, let's say, less time, I don't know, maybe end of a meeting or end of an interview and you have to give an answer. I would just tell them the bottom line up front or what's the final answer. Like, people say in meetings, if here's the executive summary, and then you go on and give the details, right? So you're not like holding it as a mystery. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm going to talk about. This is my final thing. And then let me give you the details. So you could also do that sometimes if you're running out of time and say, okay, bottom line is this is what I'm going to, it is, and here's why, right? So there's, that's my quick spiel on that, but sure, anybody else wants to add on it?
I think being top down really helps, to be very honest. That's something I really observe in a lot of meetings. Like otherwise you're just trying to catch where this thing is going towards. So just catching, building on top of it. Anything you want to add, Saurabh? Anything you want to add, Sanat?
Surita, anything from your side?
Yeah, so I think one thing that has really helped me is beyond the star format. In the interviews, I typically I am always in a time crunch, so I try to like stick to star or star L, as Sanjeev mentioned. Um, Beyond the interviews in day-to-day like meetings, typically I know that Amazon has this style and TikTok has something similar, which is we rely less on PowerPoint presentations, but we have like these one pager, two pager, six pager documents. And so we have like this, if it's like an executive summary, you have to like condense everything about a project into one page. And so the one page with like what did you do, how you did it, business impact. If folks want to dive a little bit deeper, like let's say some engineering manager, maybe it's like a three-page version of this thing. And let's say like it's your colleague who wants to know the details, where the code lies, how it's implemented, the algorithms behind it, then maybe there's like a six-pager or a seven-pager thing. And then depending on the meeting, you like go through that doc. You send that doc out to everybody before the meeting, and then folks read that doc and come to the meeting well prepared to then discuss and share their opinions about your workflow. That is an approach that works in terms of communication. Um, Other things, specifically from an interview standpoint, if you don't want to something beyond the star or star L technique, which has also worked for me, is focusing on the what part also, and not just the how. So Like the how is okay, you developed this machine learning model, or you developed this LLM, or you deployed this LLM monitoring pipeline. But a lot of the times, creating this story and communicating this story about what are you trying to do, what was the motivation, what was the business context that you are trying to solve, what was this higher level problem that was the pain point for your stakeholders, which you solved, and then you go into the how. And once you tell them, you share the results and what you learned by solving this problem. So just connecting this thread, whichever way you connect it, either the star method or like just focusing on like these higher level story and connecting the loop at the end. And then of course, you share a little bit about how you solve this problem also, such that then the interviewer can dive deeper into that specific algorithm that you mentioned, or that specific technique or tool that you may have used. If you construct your answer this way, Sanjeev or Sanat can speak more to it, but at least it shows that you have spent some time thinking about the problem, as opposed to picking the model in a package and just throwing data at it and getting some insights and shoving it in the front end without really thinking deeply about it.
Yeah, great. Here, I'll just chime in super quickly and plus one to everything that was mentioned. I'll focus on the communication and interview side of things. In the workplace, it's there's a lot to it. I don't want to take too much time, but keep in mind when it comes to interviews, especially behavioral interviews, and even in some cases system design and coding, but especially for behavioral, one of the common reasons why folks fail behavioral interviews is the communication part. Maybe they picked the bar raising example to talk about and a great story, but they just don't articulate well. And in that 3 to 5 minutes that I have for initial answer, there's all sort of gaps, and it's hard for me as interviewer to understand where they're trying to go, what were the main selling points, and even though example might have been great, but it's immediate now, right? So it's important, and I'll provide a couple maybe high level guidelines, regardless of what kind of behavioral question it is. I mean, obviously, you can use star format or star L as Jim mentioned and so on, right? But the bottom line is, whatever you're talking about, make sure that you are articulating impact or criticality of it, right? I don't care if it's conflict resolution question or the type of project that you had to deliver. I need to care about it. So what needs to be important? Don't pick something tactical that nobody cares about, that your manager wouldn't care about. Pick something that one way or the other has impact and that you're able to demonstrate it, either using non-confidential data points around a business impact or strategic impact or whatever it is, right? So the impact and criticality to the business or to the organization, that part needs to be clear. The other part that needs to be clear is complexity. When I say complexity, I'm not talking about just technical complexity. It could be people-related complexity. It could be roadmap or capacity or budget-related complexity. It could be legal complexity, whatever it is, right? But make sure that you demonstrate that complexity, and that way you're demonstrating that the example is bar raising, meaning that I wouldn't expect every EM or every TPM or every engineer to solve the problem, approach the problem the same way. So you need to demonstrate why it was complex. And then the next thing is, as you talk about your actions, make sure that you demonstrate and articulate why they were bar raising in terms of a good judgment, they exercise the problem solving, influencing others, whatever it is, right? And then the result. So that's that's about 3 different dimensions, sorry, 3 different things to make sure that whatever the kind of behavioral question you're answering, that you are articulating clearly and so on. System design is similar thing, right? So, and most of the system design type of questions are design X from scratch or something like that. Communication there is super important as well, but those are typically a little bit easier because there's templatized approach, right? So you go with clarifying functional, non-functional requirements, background napkin and math, clarify some of those. High level approach, articulate why, there's not a good, good or bad, but it's about articulating your assumptions, why you're picking this kind of tech versus the other, and so on, right? So there's a very templatized, I would say, type of approach for system design. Make sure that you practice that one as well. The other thing that I would highlight is, especially if you're interviewing for more executive roles, be aware of your audience. So if you're interviewing for a senior manager, you're gonna get maybe director or VP from product or somebody else, right? And how you're gonna communicate certain problems or certain stories to them is probably gonna be different versus how you're gonna communicate to principal engineer, what things to focus on and so on, right? So be aware of the audience. And then plus one to what I think Surita was mentioning in terms of some companies like Amazon, they are doc heavy, right? So in the workplace, whenever there's some sort of debate or big decision that needs to be made, it is expected that you're coming into a meeting with some sort of document where that clearly articulates what is a problem statement, what is that hotly debated topic, what is your recommendation versus other approaches, and so on. And the reason why I'm mentioning that in context of interview is when you're answering whether it's a conflict resolution type of question or type of questions where you had a think big idea and you influence others, is especially if you interview for that kind of environment that are doc heavy and where these kind of artifacts are expected, make sure that you do highlight that if you did it right. So how did you write a proposal in incremental fashion, collected the inputs, worked with the stakeholders, addressed concerns, so that's an important internal mechanism in terms of communication as well that companies are looking at. Hope that helps.
It does. It does. Just like I think we are almost on time with regards to almost like 10 minutes left. There's one question I really want you folks to address. Is that I was just like tapping. Give me a sec. Let me share my screen. So it's predominantly a very open-end theme. Like the theme for this whole event was Headstart 2026. So people who want to transition to new roles or upskill in their existing roles. So just keeping it super generic, like somebody who wants to use 2026 to seriously level up or transition roles. Any advice you have for each domain, like your respective domain, something that they should start doing, something that they should stop doing, like as of now, so that they can really make the next year the big game changer for their career. Anybody who wants to take a stab at it once, like over to you.
I can take a stab at it, but
Sure.
of course, I'm sure Sinat and Surya will add their own specific things. But so first of all, this is a very general question, right? What can somebody start doing and stop doing?
Yeah.
And of course, it depends on what that person currently is doing and what their end goals are. But being a general question, so then it's going to get a very general answer. One thing I would say is, and again, I think whatever I'm going to say is probably going to be a summary of what all three of us have already said before, right? Is going to be make sure you are AI fluent. You don't need to be an expert. I mean, depending on what role you're targeting, but if it's a software engineering role, you want to be AI aware, AI fluent, and which means be aware of what technologies are out there and how you can use them. And which means you're not an expert at that because that isn't the domain necessarily that you're not trying to be an ML researcher, but you are more like somebody's going to use AI tools to increase your productivity and or architect solutions and such. And also from the perspective of looking at the role or the level that you're targeting, look at what's important there, and if it's like say staff or principal level, then the depth is very important. It's more important than breadth in general, and that's a very general statement, of course, right? But what I'm trying to say is, if you take say system design as an example, compare a system design solution given by a junior or a mid-level engineer versus a staff level engineer or a principal engineer. How are you going to differentiate, right? The functional requirements, non-functional requirements. I'm just talking about the general template, the commonly accepted template of a system design. So there's functional requirements, non-functional requirements, high-level design, estimations, APIs, and then the deep dives, right? I would say most, junior engineers, junior / mid-level engineers versus say a staff level engineer will come up with a more or less similar set of functional, non-functional, even the high-level design, I would say, right? But what's going to differentiate a staff level from a junior mid-level engineer is whatever the scenario that you're going to talk about in the deep dives, failure scenarios, trade-offs, options, etc., etc. that's where the differentiation is. So if that's the role that you're targeting, you want to focus on that depth, and then the same thing with the behavioral stories, but that one we already talked about, I think, a few minutes ago. Uh, so yeah, those are my thoughts.
Great. And plus one to everything that Sanjeev mentioned, just a couple things to add. Given that we are in this weird, or I guess happy time of the year where there's going to be a lot of vacations, things that for a lot of folks at work will be slowing down. Some companies might even have collected time off. So that gives you a little bit of potential time to start to looking into what does it take to move, right? Polish up some of the things, starting with resume, obviously, LinkedIn, start networking. Networking is important, right? Reaching out with a network and starting preparing. When it comes to preparing, one general advice, and regardless whether it's now and preparing for 2026 or starting preparation 6 months from now, typically I suggest validating what kind of roles are you looking for, right? So are you looking to transition a role and a company or something else? If you're looking to transition company, great. What kind of company? There's different expectations and so on, right? And then doing the gap level analysis. So figuring out, okay, here's where I am, here's where I'm trying to get to. What are those gaps, and what are some of those potential red flags that will be reflected in an interview process? That kind of information will give you a better working backwards kind of plan if you think about it from that perspective. What are the things to prioritize for in terms of your preparation? So what are those must-have gaps that you need to close, and how are you going to prepare? Prioritize those, and then work on polishing up and practicing some of the other things as we discussed. Hope that helps.
And sorry, one thing I forgot to mention is so all of this is, what we are talking about is awesome, but then, like I've said earlier, nobody can teach driving just by talking about it. So you actually need to go out there and drive a car, right? If you're learning driving. So similarly, we talk about all these things that we should be doing. So mock interviews are very important, and mock interviews are done by at least at IK, they're done by people who are also doing real interviews in their current companies. In a real interview, and people don't give feedback they're not supposed to, but in a mock interview, it's all about feedback. At the end of the last 10, 15, 20 minutes are reserved for feedback. So that's where you are going to test drive whatever you've learned, and you're going to you know improve from there. And so as part of the IK package, there's some X number of mock interviews that are included. And so I always tell people that you yourself should be able to see a clear difference between your first couple of mock interviews and the last couple of mock interviews. It's just like, so it makes a huge difference, because these people who don't give feedback in real interviews, are not supposed to give feedback in relevant interviews, are actually giving you feedback one-on-one in your mock interviews. So, hard to argue against that, right?
Yeah, big plus one to that. And when I mentioned gap level analysis, that's exactly first in utilizing first couple of mock interviews to just figure out a baseline where we are and so on. So great addition. Yeah, thank you.
Well, anything you have to add to it? So others, I think we are well on time, right on time. Actually, we're usually not there, but today we are. If there are any parting thoughts, yeah.
Yeah, so I think just one last thought. I think agree to both Sanad and Sanjeev what they mentioned. They did mention about what to do, and so maybe I think a part of the question was what should they stop doing.
Not,
So
yeah.
maybe I'll take a stab at that. One thing that I've myself, um, I myself am a victim of this, which is the field is moving at a breakneck pace. It's everything every day. There's a new tool, new technique, new model that comes out. And so one thing that you can stop doing, or at least one thing that has helped me, especially during this downtime in December, when things are a little bit slow, is to not react to things from like a FOMO perspective, FOMO meaning fear of missing out. And like earlier part of this year, when like the new language model would come out, I would get very nervous about that thing. I wanted to know that model. I wanted to like read the technical paper associated with it. I wanted to read like the how to apply it, start writing this Jupyter notebook code that uses that model from a fear of missing out perspective. And I thought that that was not very sustainable. What has worked though, and so I changed my attitude and my mindset towards the later half of the year quite actively, and I'm still not super successful at this, but what I try to do is I try to come at a problem from a curiosity perspective, which is uh, let the models come out. Most likely, what we know as agentic AI today will be completely different 5 years from now. But at least what I can do right now is just be curious and keep on learning about these fundamentals and how fundamentally that field itself is changing, as opposed to be worrying about, oh, what is N8N, what is LangChain, what is Zapier, what is MCP and A2A. Like all of these things will keep on coming, and with these tools and techniques will keep on changing. But one thing that I think will stay constant is, or not constant, but is largely fundamental, is this whole paradigm about what I was calling these design patterns in software engineering, or the laws of physics, right? Laws of physics don't change. So I would rather keep focusing on that fundamental level about this agentic space also. There is something about the mathematical nature of transformer models, which is not going to change. It's going to remain largely the same. And so typically, if you come at these problems from a curiosity perspective, that just gives you the mental space to take a step back, take it slow, and start going deeper. With the tools and the techniques and the background associated with these models, as opposed to staying at the surface and just chasing every new flashy tool that comes out tomorrow or in January 2026 or in January 2028. It's so I have tried to not chase these flashy labels, but rather go deep into some of the foundational knowledge. And believe it or not, it's quite easy to find foundational knowledge these days. You can use ChatGPT to actually go and find the exact papers and the foundational techniques and the researchers and follow them on Twitter or LinkedIn, read their papers, read their blog articles. There's excellent folks at FAANG companies who write open source articles on Substack. That's another great resource that you can use. I have typically tried going through that material in a systematic manner as opposed to like just chasing this next tool out there, because that tool almost always changes within months these days. So that is something that I would not do.
Thank you so much, Suraj. I think that's a really valuable add-on to what Sergi, Vince, and Adit already spoken about. And I think it really summarizes the whole session really well. I don't think we're right on time. It's like 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Thank you so much for taking this up, all three of you, taking out 2 days of your weekend, Friday Eve, Saturday Eve as well. Really appreciate it. And on top of it, thanks for taking up all these questions right on spot and coming up with commendable answers. Thank you so much. And thanks to folks who have spent their time with us on a weekend. Looking forward to like leveraging this downtime to gather more information, or maybe are prepping for something. Wish you all the best in your journey wherever you are currently at. And really, really wish you a very happy holidays ahead of you. Take the downtime as well. Don't just get sucked in by the FOMO.